On the computer screen, a battle is observed between the troops of two opponents. They are grouped into squads and continue their offensive. Each of the opponents is determined. The Knights of the Blue Flag rush forward in the name of the god Nebula, and the Orcs fighting under the Red Flag do so for the hegemony, and now they are ready to clash in battle. The gamer types the required combination, after which the Orcs begin to attack. Following them, the defenders of the god Nebula grab their weapons. They are firing with all their guns. However, the enemy easily repels cannonballs with the help of magical shields. The gamer assumes that they managed to do this thanks to hegemony. The Orcs take their planes into battle, the pilots of which are ready to bomb the enemy to the last. Using the skill of magic, they manage to summon lightning that burns the enemy alive. At the same time, the pilots continue their attack, leaving not a piece of enemy land unaffected. The player thinks that since the enemy took such harsh measures, then he should at least take something radical. After thinking carefully, he decides to launch an attack with nuclear warheads. And now they are already released and soaring into the heights. The Orcs notice the missiles being launched. However, their leader grinningly says that he was ready for a nuclear bombing and sends interceptor missiles towards them. God Nebula says that the enemy is very well prepared for the battle. The interceptors meet nuclear missiles and a huge explosion occurs in the air. However, not all nuclear missiles were caught. One continued its flight in the given direction. She was sent straight to the city center. The Orc King knelt down and began to pray, in the hope that this would help him save himself and his people. The frightened inhabitants of the city follow him and also kneel to pray. However, the rocket flies closer and closer to the castle. King Eugene, without losing hope, continues his prayer. If this were the real world, these prayers would not be able to help anyone. However, it was a lost world, in which faith and prayers always bring results. Alexander thought that, as expected, the opponent used the Holy Oak strategy. The Orc patron chuckled and asked if everyone had noticed the Holy Oak's new strategy in action. He had the second rank of hegemony server. Now the guy understood why his opponent fought with such confidence. Although the peculiarity of the Orc race allows the population of the people to quickly expand, it was still incredible how he managed to gain so much faith so quickly. He simply chose the sky, the largest space, and used special checks. Meanwhile, he was preparing to fight back against technological civilization, and trying to summon the spirit of the apostle was also a good idea. However, all this was obvious. After all, there is a space much larger than the sky. This is what is above it. After the strike of nuclear warheads, the enemy decided to launch another strike of mass destruction. The spirit was given the command to stop him, because otherwise this blow could destroy the entire palace. God Nebula said that this was impossible to do, because several tungsten rods fell on the spirit. And taking into account the accumulated gravitational acceleration, it was already too late to try to do something. They could not be stopped, and every single rod pierced the spirit. This blow managed to destroy the palace of King Eugene. The impact of the rods left huge craters on the ground. King Eugene was dead, and the underground temple was destroyed along with the palace. The faith that the Orc King had so carefully cultivated would evaporate. And after faith disappears, the apostles will also disappear. In this game, the winner was a player under the nickname Nebula, who as rank 1, he thought that it was a great fight. His opponent did not understand how this happened and demanded revenge. He was confident that he could win the next fight. Hegemony continued to persuade Alexander, expecting agreement to refight. The guy was wondering if his opponent had something new, since he was so persistently offering a rematch. However, absolutely nothing happened. There were absolutely no updates to the game, and he had already completed the achievements of holding rank 1. Alexander was about to turn off the computer when he heard the sound of an incoming message. The guy didn't understand who might need him at such a late time. It was a notification from the game saying that he had managed to conquer all the game achievements, and the system thanked him for staying with the last world. He wondered if this could be the end of the game. However, that notification was followed by the next one, which stated that the last world had been in beta testing for a long time. But the official release of the game should occur soon, and the Nebula player was allowed to participate in a closed demonstration before the official release. The guy was surprised that it was closed access, and the official release of the game was still ahead. An information window appeared asking if he wanted to start. Since he received closed access, he of course wanted to try this game. After agreeing, Alexander, under his nickname Nebula, found himself in the game. He found himself near a temple, although it could rather be called ruins. Looking around, the main character was afraid that all this might turn out to be a banal dream. However, he heard a voice that made him turn around. It was a girl who said that this was not a dream, and he was chosen. She asked permission to greet Alexander, calling him by his real name. He didn't understand how she knew his real name. Besides, what did what was happening around him even mean? He was interested in what kind of shadows they were and who they were. The girl said that probably some players are already familiar with her and that they hide their faces so that this game is private. And since everyone was interested, she immediately suggested getting down to business. She stopped, holding her hands up. Alex at first thought that he was on Earth, but then he realized that this was not so, and this was a world that he had already seen many times. It was a lost world. The girl said that in this huge lost world, Alexander became a real god named Nebula. The guy thought that he had heard absolutely nothing, but he clearly sensed the confusion of those around him. He realized that the lost world is not just a game. This was the land abandoned by the gods of the past. An incredible civilization once flourished on this planet. Different races lived in harmony with each other. However, for an unknown reason, the gods left this place. Because of this, the time has come for new gods. The girl said that the game was created to find suitable candidates for the role of the god of this planet. And Alexander had the opportunity to try to take this place and become a real god. Everything that happens will be like in a game. At first, no one will believe in the guy. But if he can give his people a reason to believe in him, then he will become the only god of this planet. And he can do whatever he wants. All of Alexander's dreams will instantly come true if he becomes a real god. Alexander was interested in the question of what would happen if he surrendered. The girl explained that if he gives up now, he will return back to his world and forget everything that happened to him. However, the guy was interested in what would happen if he gave up after the game started. But it turned out that after the start of the game, he would no longer have such an opportunity. Alex asked what would happen if another god defeated him. In this case, a divine end awaited him. The guy stood in front of the girl and tried to digest the information received. He thought that the term divine end meant death, and he asked Ophelia if this meant that they were all risking their lives. However, without waiting for an answer, the guy decided that he had no reason to give up. It's time to make your choice. Ophelia said that if anyone wants to give up, they should do it right now. And those who decide to continue will begin their journey with a small race. The girl laid out the cards in front of her, after which Alexander realized that everything was indeed exactly the same as in the game, which meant that first it would be necessary to choose one of the lower races. However, people were already beginning to give up. They all gave up one by one. The guy suggested that the initial number of people should match the maximum number of players, and there were 32 of them, from which he concluded that only 27 people remained. Ophelia interrupted his thoughts by telling him that he could choose first. Alex was confused and didn't understand why he was the first. The guy walked up to the table and took one of the cards lying there. He suggested that perhaps the choice was given by ranking place in the system. When he saw his card, he was very surprised. He could never have expected such a turn of events. Mentally, he went to a very beautiful place where there was a forest and a clear river. A frog was sitting in the water, sticking its head out, and a beautiful butterfly flew past her. However, it was not a simple frog at all, but a humanoid one. Looking at the butterfly flying past, the frog thought that he had never seen such beautiful butterflies. This butterfly flew to Alexander and sat on his hand. Looking at the butterfly, the guy didn't understand why he was thinking about these humanoid frogs. After which he again picked up the card that fell to him. These were insects, which have the lowest winning percentage. But then he thought that a lot depends on how you play it out, and insects are comparable to birds, and they are quite useful at the very beginning of the journey. However, its spawn point is on the eastern edge of the continent. This meant that there wouldn't be many battles at the beginning of the game. Due to the strategy of getting rich in the early game, it will not be easy to use early aggression. In this case, the starting race should have been those who eat insects. For example, humanoid frogs. But Alexander was concerned about the number of tribes. There were about 500 of them, and it was difficult to make the right choice to start the game. In the Lost World, the player's influence over the creatures directly depends on their level of faith. 10 faith, which he did not have enough to force these frogs to do at least something. Alexander thought about what other tribes were nearby, and humanoid lizards came to his mind. After all, they also ate insects. They are also able to survive without water. The guy noticed that some of them separated from the main group, and this was to his advantage. These were the wounded and the elderly. Then he noticed a very badly injured specimen. Previously, this lizard was in the main group, but he was expelled in the struggle for power. The more he feels that the whole world has abandoned him, the more difficult it will be for him to live. The easier it will be for him to find God, having received a small miracle. However, this is such a fragile creature. After thinking about all this, Alexander decided to start with him. The humanoid lizards were exhausted and hungry from the long journey. Suddenly, they all turned their gaze forward, seeing a real gazelle there. They noticed that she was seriously injured, and everyone rushed to catch her. The lizards were very happy when they caught it, because they no longer remembered the last time they saw meat. Someone from the lagging group suggested that the elderly and wounded would not get any meat at all. And the main group attacked the animal, ate him. The meat disappeared very quickly. However, the lizards did not give up, saying that bone marrow is also very nutritious. One of them was already about to try it, but another lizard snatched the bone from his hands. He said that this company had already had enough, and it was worth leaving at least a little for those who could not hunt. This lizard collected all the bones in a pile and carried them to the group that was lagging behind. They were very glad that they were brought at least some food. They all greedily began to gnaw on the bones, absorbing the nutritious bone marrow. That very badly injured lizard was no exception, and while he was eating, flies circled around him. The main group approached Jael, asking if he really wanted to do this, but he did not understand their question. They said, "Okay, bring food to the elderly or children, but that guy, he will soon die, since his wound has already rotted." Looking at that guy, Jael thought that he should have given up a long time ago. It was completely unclear to him how he still managed to stay on his feet. However, many of them survived only because Rak took the blow of the saber-toothed tiger, and they should appreciate that. But he will die soon anyway, and the living need food. Jael asked how they weren't all ashamed to say that. At night, they all slept in groups or in pairs to keep it warm, and only one Rak lay alone. He suffered from pain and cold, and then that same beautiful butterfly flew up to him. The lizard did not understand what she needed from him and rose a little from the ground. She flew as if to show him the way. The others saw this and thought that the wounded lizard had finally decided to leave them, and he followed the butterfly. Rak, with the last of his strength, climbed up the rocks, and those who woke up decided to just silently watch him. Following the insect, he thought that this was just his sick fantasy, and in fact there was absolutely no one in front of him, and he was moving to nowhere. The lizard was sure that only he noticed it, but he hoped that suddenly it would mean at least something. He followed this butterfly as if he were following his dream of a wonderful and long life, so he was ready to climb with all his might. The beautiful butterfly rose higher and higher to the top of the mountain, and Rak confidently moved behind it. Having climbed the next platform of the mountain, he saw something but could not make out what it was. Taking a closer look, the lizard realized that the entire mountainside was simply strewn with a huge number of beetles. He realized that this food would be enough not only for him alone, this number of beetles would be enough for the whole group for a full meal. Alexander received a notification that humanoid lizards had witnessed a miracle. The main character thought that Rak had finally seen a miracle thanks to the intervention of God. Alexander was interested in what actions the wounded lizard would take next. He was very surprised when he decided to tell about this miracle himself, but the guy remembered that beings with high willpower can make many decisions on their own. Talking about the miracle that had happened, the wounded lizard decided, for greater plausibility, to bring one of the beetles to show it to the members of his group. The main character received a new notification that the Rak tribe had discovered a deity called the Nameless God of Beetles. The guy was outraged that he was called the God of Beetles, and not butterflies. The bug god tried to reassure himself by the fact that from the very beginning, no one ever had beautiful names. Watching the tribe of humanoid lizards, the main character thought that from now on, Rak would be very important to him. But the guy promised that he himself would become important to this lizard. He watched with pleasure the happy time of this tribe. Rak again saw that same butterfly and thought that he had a vision again. The lizard suggested that perhaps he should follow it again. One of the lizards asked Rak if he would follow his vision again, and he answered, winter was already very close, and the beetles appeared on the side where the cold winds were blowing, and if they continued to go there, they could freeze to death. Then that lizard suggested ignoring this vision and going in a different direction. But Rak said that this was also not a solution, because these lands were empty, after which he asked himself the question of what was the meaning of his visions. But the lizard did not know the answer to it, but for now, he could only follow them. The main character thought that they had too little faith, but at the very beginning, unfortunately, nothing could be done about it. But he needed much more of this very faith. However, if this lizard continues to believe in the god of beetles, then a future awaits him that he could not even dream of. Rarik told his tribe that the nameless bug god had led them to a refuge, and the entire tribe cheered, happy that they would survive. Alexander received several notifications at once, which stated that his deity level and insect race level had been raised from 1 to 2, and that the blessing of insects had become available to him. After which the main character decided to make Rak his priest, so that he would convey his will to his people. And the blessing was supposed to help the humanoid lizard with this. In a dream, a fly flew to him, as if trying to reach the future priest. Rak found himself in some place incomprehensible to him. He could not understand where he was and what was happening to him, after which he assumed that this was most likely just his dream. He heard someone calling him, and raising his head the lizard saw Alexander. He asked him who he was. The main character extended his hand and asked if the lizard would take it, and he asked what this man wanted from him. Alexander gave him his mask, but the lizard returned it to its place and assumed that this was the same nameless god of beetles. Waking up, Rakrak decided to tell his tribe about what he had dreamed, and they began to express their assumptions about the meaning of this dream. One of his fellow tribesmen suggested that the god of beetles was asking him to sacrifice a buffalo to him. However, in order to catch a buffalo, it was necessary to go far, far into the wasteland, and this was very dangerous. One of the tribe members began to argue with Jael, saying that the god who brought them to such a good place was asking for this. But the head of the tribe continued to insist on his own. He was not ready to risk his fellow tribesmen. Hunting a buffalo is a huge risk to life, and in order to defeat it, the whole tribe needs to fight, because the buffalo is a very strong animal. If they decide to do this, then there will be no one to look after the elderly and children. This was a weighty argument, and the arguer calmed down, because it was impossible to endanger the entire tribe. Rakrak announced that he would go alone, but Jael was against it, because he was sure that the lizard would not be able to defeat the buffalo alone. It was simply impossible, and Rakrak said that he was not going there to die. He reported that God had given him a blessing. The whole tribe was surprised to hear this, but the lizard continued, saying that when he woke up in the morning, he saw that all his wounds had healed, and his shoulder was covered with black scales, just like beetles. The head of the tribe admitted that all this was strange, but he believed that this was not a reason to go hunting for a buffalo alone. Rakrak agreed with this, and demonstrating his huge muscles, said that they would be the reason. All the lizards were amazed, because their fellow tribesmen managed to demolish a huge tree with a stick with one blow. They all ran to him, saying that this was all incredible and asking why he hid such power from them. They did not believe that it was their Rakrak, because he had recently died from his wounds. They heard some sound and began to ask what it was, and Rakrak asked if they heard it, and pointing his finger to the side said that it was a herd of buffalo. And indeed, in the direction the lizard was pointing, a whole herd of buffalo was running. Jael believed that this was impossible. A herd of buffaloes that usually run along their specific routes just happened to meet on their way. However, Rakrak decided that there was no point in thinking about it, since this was the best time to attack. He rushed at the buffalo, shouting that on this day they should get rid of hunger. One of the buffaloes was hit directly in the forehead with a spear, and because of this he fell on the spot. The rest of the lizards shouted that they needed to catch buffaloes and rushed into battle. They thought that God was sending them not only beetles, but also meat. After the fight, they piled up the buffalo bones and hung the dead buffalo on top and watered them with its blood. Rakrak sat in front of this pile of bones and asked the nameless bug god to accept their offering, no matter how pathetic it was. Everyone else joined him and also began to beg to accept this offering. They looked at the blood flowing down the buffalo's skull and continued to ask to accept this offering. Alexander thought that regardless of the fact that the ritual was performed a little carelessly, the sincerity of the people who perform it is important, and these lizards were very sincere. Alexander managed to gain even more faith than he expected. For a novice priest, this was a very good ritual, and if we also take into account the fairly short period of time in which they managed to cope, then we can say that everything went quite well. Alexander had difficulty attracting buffaloes because he is not the god of grass, which artiodactyl animals eat. To do this, he had to use slightly different methods. The main character could not believe that the lizards even ate a small buffalo calf. Although it would have been foolish at this stage to expect them to have any knowledge of animal husbandry, it was too early for that. The tribe of humanoid lizards is small for this oasis. They will be able to survive in it for a maximum of several years. At the moment, they know absolutely nothing about crop production and cattle breeding, and surviving this stage will be problematic and very difficult. It is quite difficult to discover some knowledge and skills on your own, but Alexander could not tell them directly, because in this case, he would have broken the rules of the game. Of course, you can always find a way to convey the necessary information. It just takes some time. Alexander decided to start with one blessing. Waking up from sleep, Rakrak watched the altar. Last night, he dreamed something else. However, he could not interpret his dream. For some reason, the altar was shaking in it. For some reason, no more fish appeared in the pond that had protected them for many years, and the earth dried out so much that everything stopped growing on it. His fellow tribesmen, trying to calm the priest, said that nothing like that had happened yet, and there was no point in worrying because God must definitely take care of them. Rakrak said that he also believes in God. However, God's will very often goes hand in hand with difficulties, and if they fail to understand the Boa's plan, then this will be tantamount to betrayal. This is what the priest was afraid of. He asked Jael to quickly come up to him because he wanted to show him something. Now Rakrak understood why the altar was shaking. Other humanoid lizards were heading towards them. It was they who drove these lizards out of their tribe. Jael was surprised that they came to this place, and the priest said that this was to be expected. This huge guy had blue scales, the same as the entire Rakraka tribe had before. The lizards did not understand why their former fellow tribesmen rode such a monster. Judging by the number of lizards, the entire tribe was on the move, which only meant that their homeland, the green swamps, was completely depleted. Jael suggested that the god had taken all the fertile lands, but the priest said that the lizard could not know this. They were interested in whether the second tribe knew about their shelter, because it is located on a mountain, and until you climb it, it is not visible. In this case, there was a possibility that they would simply pass by. But the lizards decided to reveal themselves and shouted that this place belonged to the god of beetles, and lizards with blue scales were not allowed there. Rakrak reassured his fellow tribesmen, saying that perhaps all this was God's plan. Jael asked if the priest really thought that God had created such a situation in order to test them, and he replied that perhaps this was not a test, but a mission. Perhaps this is a mission to accept and save those who were once their fellow tribesmen. But Jael said that if that guy was capable of at least something spiritual, then he obviously would not insist on expelling all the weak members of the tribe. At that moment, the priest saw the butterfly again. Now he was sure that he was not mistaken, and this was God's will. And then he decided to do everything in his power. Rakrak realized that everything was exactly as the god of beetles had intended. The Rakraka and Blue Scale tribes had to unite. This was all necessary for the sake of the growth in the number of believers and the development of technological progress. It was strange that the priest himself made such a decision. It seems that his high willpower, which was equal to 14, was involved in this. Rakrak decided that the appearance of the Blue Scale tribe was the work of Alexander. He was partly right, and God sent locusts to the place where the tribe had previously lived and forced them to look for a new shelter. A leader with high willpower is very good, and if you impose a high level of faith on them, then soon Alexander will practically not have to make any decisions himself. Then the lizards will be able to carry out his orders more effectively. Blue Scale addressed the priest, calling him a noisy fellow and asking if they lived in this place. The lizard didn't like what he called it, but he confirmed that this was their land. The Blue Scales grinned and asked what they had there, but they rudely replied that it was none of his business. But then they decided to tell them that in their oasis there are trees, fertile land, mining, and the most important thing that is there is God. This place belongs to the nameless bug god. Blue Scales said that the priest's words were incomprehensible to him, and there was no point in talking about it. He wanted to drive away the tribe that believed in God and said that if they left now, he would not attack them. The lizard did not know the number of the enemy, but was sure that he would not be able to cope with his tribe. He said that since time immemorial, it was necessary for a leader to be able to count. Rakrak repeated that he did not want to fight and was not at all in the mood for a fight. The priest believed that the unfortunate and exhausted can always find shelter in the arms of God, and then God will take care of them. Blue Scale only mocked his words. He was not at all interested in the topic of God. He laughed and said that apparently Rakrak still couldn't count. But he replied that this was just the opinion of this lizard, and he did not know God. Blue Scales said that all this was nonsense, after which he began to attack and shouted for the priest to finally die. Rakrak asked the Lord to grant him courage and strength in order to meet the enemy face to face. The priest stood in front of the Blue Scales, who wanted to crush him with the help of the huge paws of the monster he came riding on. Thanks to the intertribal battle, the number of experience points among the tribes has significantly increased. The tribe of humanoid lizards was now at Alexander's disposal. This happened thanks to the fact that he paid special attention to them, and he also managed to discover a new skill. Alexander heard Rakrak's requests and decided to help him, since he knew that he still needed this lizard. Blue Scale had already given the command to his pet when he sensed something was wrong. The god of beetles helped the lizard, giving him strength and courage. And Blue Scales did not understand how his opponent managed to dodge, because just recently he was expelled from the tribe because he was too weak. However, he shouted that this would not happen again and rushed into battle again, hoping to defeat Rakrak. Having assessed the characteristics of the Blue Scales, Alexander was sure that his ward could have dealt with this enemy alone. He realized that the whole problem lay in the animal controlled by this lizard. However, thanks to the help of God, he will not have problems with this monster, because the man managed to increase his characteristics and make him the leader of the tribe, and awarded him with a new god's avatar, which is called divinity. 1 unit of divinity is equal to the maximum possible power of the subject, multiplied by 200. Simply put, the total strength of this lizard was now 650, and he could easily damage this monster with his powerful blows. Blue Scale did not understand how this was even possible because the priest easily threw his animal. The lizard men from the Blue Scale tribe were delighted with the strength and skills of Rak. This overwhelming difference in strength will make absolutely everyone appreciate the strength and power of not only the priest, but also the god who bestowed it on him. Rising from the ground, the Blue Scales grabbed his weapon and rushed at the enemy, shouting that he should not be distracted by anything during the fight with him. He said that there were no mistakes in his calculations. However, Rak, without listening to the enemy, struck him with his own blow. From this blow, the Blue Scale's legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Looking at the enemy tribe, the priest asked who wants to be next. However, they all threw down their weapons and, falling on their knees, swore allegiance to the lizard. Rak was incredibly glad that it was all over, but he still couldn't believe that God had just controlled his body. After everything that happened, the tribe returned to their oasis, which they called a shelter. The united two tribes spent time at the altar as if nothing had happened. One of the lizards, who previously belonged to the blue-scaled tribe, asked Rak, since he was a member of their tribe before being expelled, how did his scales stop being blue? And he said that this was the whole point. Thanks to the worship of the god of beetles, they changed a lot and became much stronger. Otherwise, they would not be able to survive in the wasteland. Jack was surprised and said that the power of this god is immense. Later, in a conversation with the priest, Jael said that the strength of the lizard cannot be so great, or rather, he could not have imagined such a strong lizard before. After which he asked his comrade if everything was okay, because with the addition of another tribe, there were 6 times more of them, and this place could simply begin to deplete. Then Rak said that they would have to leave, and his interlocutor was surprised by such an answer. He asked if they should really return to the wasteland again, after which he said that they could not wander forever in search of something good. The lizard suggested that the answer might be hidden somewhere in those lands, because God's hint was the appearance of their longtime brothers. The monster of blue scales was raging, and the lizards tried to pacify it and said that its owner was no more. They didn't understand why this beast couldn't just calm down. The tribe was unable to subdue him, and they understood that at this rate, he would soon break loose and run away. A priest came to the aid of the tribe. He simply brought the hungry beast some food. Having noticed food, the animal sharply changed its behavior and began eating. Rak said that if the animal wanted more, then he should be quieter, after which he brought him some more food. He believed that since God had mercy on this animal and left it alive, it means he had some kind of plan regarding it. Manon showed with all his appearance that he wanted more food. But the lizard said that if he wanted to be on his side, then he would have to learn patience. After these words, the beast obediently lay down on the ground and began to watch what would happen next. When leaving, Rak asked his fellow tribesmen to notify him if the Manon suddenly began to cause mischief again. After everything that happened, the lizards spent time peacefully talking. They looked at the knife, and one of them asked the other if he could do something similar. And he replied that if it weren't for that guy's stubbornness, he would have made a better weapon long ago. His interlocutor did not see any relationship between these, but the lizard explained to him that it was all about the trees. When creating weapons, they burned a large number of trees in order to obtain a special flammable material. Rak promised to think about this idea and make a decision the next day. A lizard approached the priest and said that he had heard that Rak was looking for a lizard who could accompany him in the wasteland. Rak assumed that a wanderer was standing in front of him, and he replied that it was so. He was a simple body wandering in search of shelter. While he wandered, he learned to find ways, and he had several ideas about lands that could save them from starvation. However, the lizard could not say for sure whether other wanderers had occupied them. Rak was surprised and asked if this meant that these lands could be found by other wanderers, and the wanderer replied that it was so. But the priest was confident that everything would be fine, because if they decided to go against them, then they would simply need to defeat their opponent and take the lands for themselves. The wanderer said that if they were decisive enough, he could easily trust them. However, the priest asked in response what the wanderer could do in order to earn the trust of Rak. The lizard pointed his finger up and said that his answer was there. However, Rak and Jael did not understand what was the matter and asked if the answer really lay in the sky. But he again answered with a riddle, saying that it was not just in the sky. They continued to guess and suggested that perhaps it could be in the stars, and then the wanderer said that it was so. He said that the stars are in motion, and he managed to find his own rules. He said that if you know in what ways the stars move, then it is possible to find a way anywhere. The lizards were very interested in this topic because they knew nothing at all about it. The wanderer promised to tell the priest about the paths of the stars, after which he asked if everything came together within a few days, would he be able to earn the trust of the priest? And he replied that in that case, of course, he would. The wanderer, pointing to the sky, explained to Rakrak everything he knew about the stars and their movement. After all the explanations, he said goodbye to the priest, and before leaving said that they would see each other at the same time and in the same place. A lizard came running to Rakrak, guarding the Manon, and the priest asked him if the beast had gone berserk again. But he said that Manon was of course a little dissatisfied, but after they started giving him food on a schedule, he became much calmer and softer. Yor said that Jael said that they needed to find a way to move through the wasteland without the risk of starvation. The lizard said that when he saw how the priest managed to calm the Manun with food, an idea came to his mind. He suggested that this could be done not only with him, but also with other animals. Looking at the buffaloes, he said that, for example, with them. Thus, the Rakraka tribe discovered a new skill in cattle breeding. It was believed that at some point human history had two branches. Some began actively cultivating land and growing crops, and others made every effort to devote themselves to cattle breeding. The main character thought that this information was mentioned even in the game he completed. However, crop production was considered more stable, and it was not for nothing that most civilizations began their development near large bodies of water. But the tribe he has chosen consists of humanoid lizards, and they are very strong physically and adapted to the environment, and what they need most is cattle breeding. In addition, a title appeared in their tribe that could promote them. It was ore processing, which the lizard from the former Blue Scale tribe, who had recently joined them, began to do. With its help, they learned to shape metal. Of course, it was still softer than good bronze products, but for the Rakraka tribe, which had to fight with stone tools, this was already quite a big step forward. Watching the tribe, the beetle god knew that in addition to this, they had acquired another equally important skill. This skill was astronomy, of course. It was still difficult to call their knowledge in this area by this term, but God was sure that in the distant future they would be able to use it correctly. Watching the starry sky, Rakrak realized that the wanderer was right, and the stars are the guides of the heavens. This meant that all he had to do was put his own plan into action. Gathering the entire tribe at the altar, he said that quite a lot of time had already passed since the moment when God led them to this oasis, and they even happened to meet their brothers, whom they could abandon just as they did in their time, thereby choosing lonely life. And in this case, they would have been able to live much longer on this earth. But then those whom they abandoned would have died in the vast expanses of the wasteland. But this would be wrong, because God wanted salvation, not rejection, because this should be their greatest good. All the gathered lizards listened very carefully to the head of the tribe, and he said that at dawn they would all leave these lands, asking the wanderer to come to him. The priest told everyone that this lizard had been enlightening him for several days on the secrets of traveling using star maps, and Rakrak was able to make sure that he had told the truth. After which the lizard said that the wanderer would lead them forward. From that moment on, they would trust him in charting their further path. He wanted everyone to know where the wanderer would lead them and asked him to tell them about it. Pointing to the starry sky, the wanderer began to tell the tribe in detail about their plans for the route. He said that after the morning sun rose, they would go to the right of the place where it rose, and for 10 whole days they would move forward. Then, turning right, they will walk along the Rotten River for another 15 moons, and then for another 3 days along the mountain fault. After such a long route, they will reach their goal, the endless forest, in which there will be many wild beasts and tribes of other creatures. After his story, the leader of the tribe made a conclusion and informed the others about it, saying that this place was ideal for their tribe. Then he thanked the stranger and told him that he could go. After all this, Rakrak menacingly turned to Yuri, asking why they didn't eat any of the buffaloes caught yesterday. And he said that the tribe simply wasn't that hungry. However, the priest did not understand him and said that everyone had worked so hard trying to catch them, but had received absolutely no reward in return. Yuri agreed that everyone had done a very nice job, but he was not really hungry and decided that it would be better to eat this prey at the moment when he was hungry. Rakrak liked his answer and praised the lizard for this clever idea. The priest said that it was excellent that the lizard wanted to eat the buffalo now, but he restrained himself for the sake of his future. He asked whether his fellow tribesmen would continue in the same spirit, to which he replied that he would behave this way until he starved. Rakrak was again pleased with his answer and wanted to reward the lizard for such thoughts, and he gave him a new spear with an iron tip instead of a stone one. Yor did not expect such generosity and was very pleased with the reward he received. The head of the tribe did not stop there. He said that everyone who followed this lizard and overcame their desire to eat without need deserves this reward. After the lizards received new spears, they could not hide their emotions. They were incredibly happy. Whispering, the lizard said that this was incredible and they also wanted to get it. Jel stood and thought that he was interested in the plan of the head of the tribe, but now it seems he understood what he was thinking about. Taking the buffalo skull in his hands, Rakrak asked everyone to approach him one by one. He put it on his face like a mask and said that the power of God would now come with the true warriors. The head of the tribe said that their journey would only be successful if they were patient and showed the same restraint as today. Wearing the same mask made from Yuru's buffalo skull, he said that from that moment on his name was Bone Warrior. Then he said that this was God's will. In this way, he invited many lizards to come to him. And then at dawn, he announced that the hour had come to leave this divine place, after which he added that everyone should remember that God's will is with them, therefore they are not tied to any place. He told everyone to let the nameless bug god into their heads, after which he said that he could not promise that it would be easy, but that they must move forward fearlessly. The priest promised that for their common good, they could cope with this journey, just as they coped with the desire to eat a buffalo. He ordered us to strengthen ourselves and move forward, having said that the nameless god of beetles will be with them along the entire road. Looking at the sky, he thought that he had arbitrarily expressed the will of God and asked the god of beetles to grant him forgiveness for this. The main character, who was watching the lizards at that time, said that the priest should not apologize because if he had acted differently, he would not have been elected priest. He thought that since he managed to achieve the growth of his allies, everything was going very well, and they were increasing their levels one after another. In addition, Rakrak's special skills finally showed themselves, and he was able to increase his leadership level by 7 points at once. And he did a great job and lived up to the expectations of the bug god. Rakrak managed to make a new beginning. Finally, the entire tribe of lizards set out on the road, taking with them a captured herd of buffalo. And they didn't forget about Manhwa. However, after walking a small part of the way, he fell to the ground, and the wanderer assumed that he was very tired. Rakrak asked if they had time to rest, to which the wanderer replied that they had no other choice, and therefore they would have to stop. After his words, the head of the tribe ordered everyone to stop and take a short break. He wondered if they would be able to find what they were looking for when they reached the end of the mountain ranges, and if he would become stronger if he rested, after which he concluded that there was only the unknown ahead, and therefore he should sit down and rest a little. Rakrak thought that he had not eaten anything for a long time. He said that the tribe had been walking at this pace for 3 whole days. They were all very tired, and the food they took with them was almost gone. They could only hope for God's miracle. One of the lizards ran to the leader and reported that another tribe had appeared ahead. They rushed headlong towards the Rakraka tribe. This tribe ran to attack the lizards of the Rakraka tribe, shouting that after this huge monster collapsed, nothing could block their path anymore. But Rakrak stood in their way and said that they really did not have a tower, after which he corrected himself and said that perhaps, of course, they were just stupid. The tribe of green people did not expect to see confrontation from humanoid lizards. They threw down their weapons in horror, and then they fell to their knees in front of Rakrak and began to ask for his forgiveness. Having said that there was a misunderstanding, and they just wanted to leave this canyon as quickly as possible. The leader asked again about the misunderstanding, and they replied that they were simply in a very big hurry. They ran away from their homes and, thinking about their relatives who had gone to the wasteland, they wanted to eat. Rakrak asked why they ran away from their own home. He was also interested in what happened in the wasteland. The green man pointed his finger to the side and asked if the lizard could see that hill, after which he said that they used to live there, and although the local lands could hardly be called fertile, it was still enough for their tribe. This was enough for them until that monster appeared. Rakrak asked in surprise what kind of monster he meant. God also became interested in what kind of monster we were talking about, and he saw something huge, with a very large number of legs. He guessed that this was a mortal abomination, an ancient scolopendra, which had a level 9 abomination. The description of the ancient world says that these creatures were created by the lost gods of the past. However, even after the disappearance of the owners, this abomination remained on the earth. The green man pointed the leader of the lizard tribe down the cliff. At the foot of the rock was that same abomination that they called the monster. She had a special skill. These are poisonous fangs. This grace was given to her by a forgotten god. The bug god thought that this was too strong an opponent for them at the moment. The lizards stood and watched the abomination from the side. They did not understand what to do next and where to go. The lizards from the Rakraka tribe noticed that the ground began to shake, but the green man explained that it was just that monster growling. One of the lizards asked the leader what they would do. Rakrak asked the wanderer how long it would take them to go around, and he replied that if they decided to return to the wasteland and go around the mountain, it would take about 8 days. The leader understood that 8 days was too long. Alexander noticed that he was hesitating, but he could be understood. He did not know what to do, and his fellow tribesmen were very scared. Taking a detour would be a wise decision. However, God did not know what decision the tribal leader would make. Jael decided to take a good look around while the leader considered his decision, and he noticed huge stones on the top of the cliff, after which he told the leader that they should fight. After all, now they had an advantage. However, neither Rakrak nor the leader of the Green People tribe could understand what advantage he was talking about. However, he explained, saying that their artisan uses a method that speeds up the melting of metal, and asked the leader if he remembers how he does it. Rakrak said that the artisan uses a special tool for this, and the lizard agreed with him. He calls this method air bellows, and the technique requires less effort than anything known to the tribe. Rakrak realized that if they used a special tool, they could achieve greater power with less effort. But the artisan experimented for a very long time before achieving a good result. But Jael assured that they did not need anything special, but a simple tool would do. They took a huge stick and decided to use it to throw stones down from the cliff. The lizards made great efforts to ensure that everything worked out for them. We have developed a whole strategy for when to push and when to let go. They made efforts for the count of 1-2. God realized that they were rolling stones to crush the Scolopendra. It was a simple but very good idea. However, in order to kill such a centipede, it was necessary to throw all the stones there at the same time. Unfortunately, Alexander was not sure that this could be done. Jael shouted about pushing faster, and they began to make even more efforts to accomplish their plans. Finally, they managed to move one of the stones from its place. One of the lizards shouted joyfully that the stone was falling down, and Jael could not believe that it worked. The stones flew down one after another. They flew straight towards the monster that both tribes feared. One of the humanoid lizards asked if they managed it. However, they failed to destroy the monster, and it only became more raging. It crawled up the rock, and the lizards noticed it. They rushed to dump the remaining stones as quickly as possible. But Alexander believed that it was too late for this. The god of beetles seemed to inhabit the body of the priest, and he began to throw huge stones down. He single-handedly threw them all at the monster crawling towards them. The leader talked about how the tribe just needed a little help. After all, this monster was not going to stand still and continued its upward movement. He decided to jump to meet this Scolopendra. The whole tribe was amazed by his actions. Rakrak thrust his iron-tipped spear straight into her head. Then one of the stones hit her directly in the face. The limbs of this monster scattered in different directions. The leader, who found himself on the ground, watched as the enemy landed on this very ground. The god, watching everything that happened, was glad that the hunt was a success. The defeated monster lay at the foot of the mountain directly in front of Rakrak. The tribe managed to destroy the ancient Scolopendra. Faith in the bug god continued to grow, but he got something more important. He wanted to kill this abomination precisely for this purpose. This item was the essence of abomination. Each god has resources needed for a certain small race. They can be obtained with the help of faith, but to create a completely new thing, special items are used. With this essence, God will be able to summon the entity. The essence is a generator of faith that spreads the word about God by its very existence. In addition, the entity has the ability to develop, and if developed strongly enough, it can receive a special class like an apostle or an avatar. Alexander was interested in creating an entity in this world that was the same as in the game, or whether it was different in some way. He thought about what he should create. The lizards gathered near the centipede were discussing whether it was possible to eat its meat. Jael tasted it and commented on how it stinks a little, but doesn't taste too bad. However, after smelling it again, he said that it would be difficult to eat it like this. Jael suggested that since raw meat is not suitable, perhaps it is worth diluting the taste with something else. For example, adding an edible part of the vine and cooking the meat over a fire. In this way, they will be able to kill the smell. After this idea came to her mind, she started cooking. She brought the resulting dish to Rakrak to try, and he said that it had become soft and tasty. Then Jael decided to talk about how she tried to cook it over a fire. Just add some edible greens and fry it. Rakrak said that the smell of this meat was so unpleasant that he already wanted to throw it all away, after which he asked a friend to teach him a useful cooking skill. The girl said that she noticed that there was an heir in the orc tribe, and Rakrak confirmed her words, saying that everything was true. Then she said that soon he would also need an heir. After all, sooner or later the leader will grow old, and this was also necessary for stability in the tribe. Rakrak asked if she thought that he needed to find a partner, and she asked a counter question, saying that if he doesn't see anyone in this role, then what about her? He didn't know what to answer and turned the conversation, saying that there was something shining behind Jael. Rakrak guessed that it was inside the stone on the monster's back. One of the lizards tried it on his teeth and said that he could not eat it, and the wanderer explained that it was metal, and it was called gold. Jael said that he had seen it before when the artisan showed him many different metals. If you clean it well, it will reflect light and shine beautifully, and it also does not change its color over time and does not bend, which is probably why it is valued more than other metals. One of the lizards was outraged, because they did not care about all these qualities, but it was soft and heavy. Then the wanderer asked him if he wanted to hunt deer. This is an animal with hooves and long horns, and its meat is sweet and very tasty. Just recently, the orcs told the wanderer where it was fashionable to hunt them. The lizard wanted to go there right away and asked the leader if he wanted to join them, but Rak refused. He thought that this metal does not rot. Everything dies and decomposes. Nothing in this world remains unchanged, but this sign will never rot. The one who made it tried to save something on it. He was interested in what it could be. The leader's thoughts were interrupted by Jael, who reported that the tribe was ready for bed. Rak said that he didn't tell anyone where he was going, and it's very good that this lizard always manages to find him. Jael replied that she always manages to do this because Rak is the only lizard who wears a fur cape. The leader was surprised, saying that it was she who told him to wear it, and he said that since he was the leader of the tribe, she just wanted to make him special. She believed that a tribal leader should have some kind of symbol. Rak saw some glowing symbols over the carcass of a dead deer and wondered what it was. He didn't even understand whether this was happening in reality or whether it was his fantasy. The movements of the beetles recreated the symbols that were on the gold. He sat for a very long time and tried to unravel the meaning of everything that had happened. At dawn, Jael, through her sleep, heard someone calling her. Opening her eyes, she saw the leader and asked what was the matter. Was there really any problem? And he talked about how he wanted to show her something. They went together to that place, where the leader sat all night. Rak drew a symbol on the sand and said that it meant a male lizard, but the girl did not understand him and asked him to explain it to her. Drawing another sign, he said that it was the sign of a lizard woman. Having drawn an equal sign between them, he said that this meant that they were becoming partners. Smiling, he said that this was his answer to her proposal. The leader took the girl by the hand, and they sat together for a long time. Thanks to these actions of Rak, they were able to invent writing. It would take several more generations to create a stable written language, but Alexander was glad that this happened at the very beginning. Now it's time to enjoy the festival. To the ignorant, it might seem that this is the most ordinary hunt. However, the competition to catch the largest game for their partner is a way for humanoid lizards to celebrate their wedding. The leader managed to kill a whole deer, but it seems they both successfully completed their task. The orc leader asked if Rak and his tribe were really not against the orcs remaining to live on this land, to which they received the answer that they could continue to live as they had lived before, because sooner or later the humanoid lizards would still have to face this monster. The orc was very grateful and bowed before Rak. He introduced his son to the priest and said that he was the future leader of their tribe. The orc said that their tribe was more familiar with this area, so his son could lead them further. Rak liked this idea. Orcs used to live in forests until they were driven out by large beasts and other tribes. But thanks to humanoid lizards, they managed to return to their usual way of life. The orcs said that they could never forget the kindness of the Raka tribe. The leader noticed some kind of mark on the ground. He asked the wanderer if he knew what it was. He replied that most likely these are frogs that walk on two legs. They are also called humanoid frogs. Rak had never heard of such things before and was very interested in this information. The wanderer continued his story, saying that among them there are both peaceful and warlike species. They speak and think the same as humanoid lizards. Since they went out on reconnaissance, this means that they are at war with someone. Judging by the tracks, there was not one, but at least as many as 5 representatives of this species. The wanderer assumed that their tribe was much larger than the Raka tribe. After all these stories, Rak, on reflection, ordered to return to the temporary camp. By evening, they lit torches in their temporary shelter. Jael watched as Rak ordered to set up the tents further and take up as much space as possible. The girl didn't understand why they would do this, but he explained, saying that apparently the other tribes were much larger than them. She suggested sending more scouts to the borders, and he agreed with her, but ordered to make sure that everyone had an equal share of the work. The other tribes would definitely be watching them. A few days later, they changed their location. Fortunately, no collisions with frogs occurred. During this time, they managed to strengthen the security of the tribe well. Alexander doubted that other players managed to achieve the same progress as him. Cattle breeding developed quite well. The tribe also managed to adapt their houses to their new habitat. They surprisingly quickly managed to spread literacy within the tribe. The symbols on the stone were visible to all lizards, and the designations of hunting grounds were carved on the simplest map. Rak also began recording the amount of crops each lizard collected. Now everyone could see and evaluate their results and the results of others, which increased their productivity. God, who observed all this, thought that this was an excellent development. Swarms of locusts. In the center of the continent, they are gradually growing, and in the north, the number of insects has also increased. The insect race had reached the 4th level, If there were other players next to Alexander, he would not have been able to even dream about it. But since he had been summoned from the eastern lands, perhaps it was time to take another advantage from the circumstances. Both Rakrak's abilities and the tribe's development have already reached average levels. But that was only the beginning. Further dangers awaited them that they had not yet encountered. One of the lizards informed the leader that they were in trouble. The frogs were heading in their direction. Rakrak met representatives of the frog tribe. When he saw them, he thought this is what these humanoid frogs are like. Among them, he noticed one lizard. The leader did not understand what this lizard was doing among the frogs. He suggested that perhaps they wanted to negotiate. One of the frogs introduced himself, saying that his name was Shunan, and he was the son of the great leader Alroy. He said that they were not going to attack the tribe of humanoid lizards. Rakrak thought that Shunan was polite in his own way. He introduced himself and said that he was the leader of this tribe, then continued by saying that his tribe also did not want to fight. But he was interested in why the frogs honored them with their visit. Shunan replied that they came to report that the Rakraka tribe had settled in their territory. The leader did not think that all this land belonged to the frogs, because when his tribe arrived in this place, they did not see any markings of the boundaries of the frogs' territory. Of course, he admitted that they didn't try to look for them. He wanted to apologize for such a misunderstanding, but he asked them to understand, saying that such rules were different from those in their homeland, which was in very distant lands. So he asked the frogs to let them stay until they found a more suitable place. Rakrak made this request to Shunan, saying that he was the son of the great leader and of all those present. Only he could help resolve this request. The frog agreed with this, saying that with his authority as the future leader, this was quite possible. Rakrak thought that he was right, and the leader sent this delegation to take a closer look at his tribe. Naturally, the lizard still had many questions for them, but he needed to be careful and unobtrusively find out as much necessary information as possible. He said that the place where they were was not the most suitable for such serious conversations and invited the guests to go to their village, where he promised to meet them with all hospitality. Since both tribes agreed to peace without any strife, this should have been noted. However, Shunan considered this idea not the best. He thanked the chief for the invitation and said that he could not accept it, since their tribes were not yet so familiar. But Rakrak said he couldn't just let go of those to whom his people owed a debt. After which he proposed to celebrate this matter right at the place of their negotiations. Shunan agreed with this option. The leader ordered the meat to be cooked over a fire for their guests. While the food was being prepared, they sat and talked on various topics. Now Rakrak needed to understand what kind of relationship connected that lizard and the frogs, and why they really came to his tribe. However, it was impossible to show them directly that these issues interested him. If they understood what he was thinking about, they would use it against his people. The leader asked what those big feathers were around the frog's neck. He said that these were cockatrice feathers. Rakrak didn't know who he was and asked Shunan again. The frog said that the leader was lucky since he had not yet met them. These are huge, dangerous birds that stand on two legs and live in the forest area. Not only are they large, but they are also poisonous and very difficult to catch. In addition to their speed, they are also known for their agility. It is because of them that the frog tribe has to look after this area, the leader asked, since they are so difficult to catch, whether the frogs attack them from a distance with a spear throw. The frog asked in surprise what a spear was. Rakrak did not have time to answer him when he decided to show him his weapon and asked him to bring a bow and arrows. The leader did not know what it was, and he was very curious. Shunan turned to the lizard who had come with him and asked if he was not busy to bring his weapon. After he brought everything, the frog asked him for one more favor. The frog asked him to hang up a target so that he could practice shooting. After Shunan demonstrated his shot, the leader expressed his surprise at the accuracy of the hit, and he said that they had been learning shooting since childhood, and he was the best student of their tribe, after which Rakrak asked permission to try archery. The frog willingly gave him his weapon, and the leader thanked him for it. Shunan said the process may seem daunting the first time. Rakrak silently assessed the structure of this weapon and thought that the thread and stick were very strong. The damage and area of destruction were less than that of a spear, but you could carry many arrows with you. In addition, arrows fly more accurately than spears and you can shoot them much more often. He would have liked to go much deeper into studying this skill, but he had never hit the target and was already out of arrows. The frog said that nothing and no one comes out perfect the first time and told Owen to collect the arrows. Rakrak said that he was the one who shot, so he should have collected the arrows, but Shunan said that he could consider this as his gesture of goodwill. But there was something more important than shooting, what the leader needed to study. He approached the lizard of another tribe under the pretext of helping and asked if his name was Owen. The leader noticed that the lizard had panicked and asked him how he ended up among the humanoid frogs, and he hesitated in response. But then he said that they live in the same tribe. Rakrak asked why this happened, and the lizard replied that it was all because the two races could help each other. The leader did not understand what this help was, and Owen grinned and suggested that we continue to live in harmony. However, Rakrak continued his interrogation and asked how they could help each other. Owen said that in exchange for protection, lizards can help frogs in other ways. Frogs cannot leave the water for long, and lizards are good at collecting fruit and climbing trees. Sharing food with them for protection is not a bad idea. The leader said that they themselves are able to fend for themselves, and his tribe does not need protection. But the interlocutor continued to insist on his point, saying that the forest is a very dangerous place, and Olroy's tribe is the largest in this forest. The lizard was sure that without these frogs, he would not have been able to live up to this moment. Rakrak asked the interlocutor to forget about their conversation and pretend that he was asking about how to shoot a bow correctly. While the lizards and frogs were talking, the meat had already cooked. Shunan really liked the meat, and he said that he had already gotten used to deer meat, but various additives only made it tastier. The leader was glad that his dish was liked by a representative of another tribe. Rakrak asked if Shunan had ever tried buffalo meat. He said that he had tried it, but they had long since stopped catching buffalo. The leader said that they kept live buffaloes in their tribe, and he offered to exchange one of them for a pair of bows. The frog was already ready to do this for a whole living buffalo, but noticing that someone was approaching him, he said that it would be unlikely to be done. Surprised, Rakrak said that he was very sorry. Shunan promised that they could return to this conversation after they got to know each other better. He was glad that the other members of his tribe had already gotten along with the lizards. Not only was Owen able to integrate into the society of the Rakraka tribe, but also the warriors of the frog tribe. But this was not surprising, because two different species coexisted in it. Shunan asked Owen to tell him how they had helped each other within the tribe over the past 2 months. He responded by saying that he would be very glad to tell about the friendship of their peoples. The leader thought that if he had not been able to talk to this lizard in advance, then perhaps he would even have bought all these stories. Getting ready to leave, the frog said that he was very glad to meet them. Rakrak suggested that next time they should come to the frogs themselves, in order not to bother them on such a long route. Shunan wanted to agree at first, but on reflection, he refused the offer, saying that this place was very well suited for their meetings. They said goodbye and the frogs went to their tribe. As he was leaving, Shunan tapped the lizard on the shoulder and said something to him, at which time he looked very frightened. Rakrak asked Jael if she noticed this. This was not at all like a relationship of equals. After returning to his native tribe, Shunan started a serious conversation with the lizard. He hit Owen in the face with great force. Then he asked if he really thought that he would not notice anything at all. He was interested in what Owen had told the leader of the other tribe. The lizard who was kneeling said that he didn't tell him anything at all. He just asked how to shoot a bow correctly, and the lizard gave him a couple of tips. Another huge humanoid frog began to kick the lizard and asked what these stupid excuses were, since he himself did not know how to shoot a bow. Owen replied that the frog was right, but he lied to Rakrak so that he would believe all their stories. After thinking for a second, Shunan said that this was the right decision. The lizard continued, saying that he then pretended that he could not tell more, and made it clear that in order to learn how to shoot a bow, he needed to give something in return to the frog tribe. The frog was interested in what decision the leader made after that, and the lizard said that he abandoned this idea, saying that he had absolutely nothing to offer the tribe of frogs. Shunan praised Owen, calling him cunning. Pointing to the side, the frog asked the lizard if he remembered that he was on that island. The lizard turned to the island and fell silent. Frog said that Owen was very lucky because he was already ready to offer these children for sacrifice, but new victims found them themselves. The lizard said that the frog was right and he was very lucky. He promised to try to outsmart the lizards of the other tribe. He sat on the shore and thought that if he had known that everything would turn out this way, he would not have even tried to get into this tribe, after which he thought that he should have been immediately wary when the frogs welcomed the lizards so warmly, or when they dragged his tribe to the brotherhood ceremony, or at worst, when they ordered the lizards to come to this island. The remaining 200 lizards could not oppose 1,500 frogs. In addition, God was on the side of the frog tribe. This is a two-headed monster who commands frogs. Just as they commanded the lizards, he thought that this would never change. The leader of the tribe of lizards with black scales looked like a strong warrior, and despite the 600 members of the tribe, they were just simple savages who did not know about the existence of bows and arrows. The lizard calmed himself by thinking that if the Rakraka tribe was sacrificed to the god of frogs, then Owen's tribe would be able to live at least a little longer. He asked his son to be patient and promised that he would soon convince those lizards to come to the frogs. He remembered that the lizards wanted to get their bows in exchange for the buffalo. and I thought that this tribe could be lured into the territory of the frogs under the pretext of better acquaintance. Rak wasted no time in his tribe and tried to learn how to shoot a bow. After the next shot, he asked Jalka this time, but she replied that the arrow only reached half the maximum distance. He was upset because he didn't even aim. He thought that this was the limit of their spears and bows because they exactly repeated the appearance, but they could not repeat the bowstring that the frogs used. Jael reported that the fifth meeting was about to begin. It all looked like the frogs wanted to learn as much as possible about their tribe. Rak guessed that they were hiding something behind this simple trust, and assumed that they wanted to pull something off. The problem with the lizards was that they still did not know the plans of the frogs, and they had to remain on their guard all the time. He said that at this meeting it was time for him to achieve at least something, and asked Jael if they had collected the necessary herbs. She replied that the herbalist found out where they grow, and they collected everything. Rak was pleased with this and said that it would be nice if Owen could be the solution to their problem. Jael suggested giving him a chance for this. In the frog tribe, the lizard was again beaten by Shunan's henchmen. The lizard begged to be released and assured that he had done everything as Shunan ordered. However, the frog ordered to leave him, worried that he might die. Owen said that the black-scale lizards were a lot more careful than he thought. The frog asked if they were really not at all like his tribe, which jumped into the trap without a second thought. The lizard said that it was so. The frog sighed heavily and threw the lizard aside. After Shunan's henchmen left them alone, the frog told the lizard to hurry up, since his father ordered the sacrifice ceremony to be held as early as possible. He ordered the lizard to find out as much information as possible about that tribe in order to attract the leader along with the tribe to his territory as soon as possible. But Owen did not understand why such a rush was needed. The lizard thought that only frogs know about this, and therefore you need to listen to them as carefully as possible. Shunan said that the illness of his father and the elders was only getting worse, and therefore the sacrifice could not be postponed. The lizard asked, since they were sick, did that mean they were infected with garlic disease? Was she really that dangerous? The frog said that the lizard should not know about this, but thought that it was not a big deal if one of them found out about the disease. He said that scabies is a dangerous disease, and those sick with this rubbish not only begin to itch, they also become covered with white sticky mucus. And no matter how much you wash off this mucus, it will not go anywhere, and over time it will cover the entire body. After there is too much of it, breathing problems arise. And the next stage is death. Recently, a priest of this tribe died of scabies. The lizard thought that this was the first time he had heard that scabies could be fatal. He did not understand why Shunan was telling him about all this. He assumed that Shunan was testing him, and he should neither be happy nor surprised. Owen decided that the lizard should not find out about this. Otherwise, there will be those among them who will mock the frogs. Shunan agreed with this, but added that they will not be able to hide this information for too long. The lizard said that you can prepare and change the lizard's reaction, for example, tell the tribe that they too can get sick from it. The frog liked this idea, but he was confused by the fact that this disease did not apply to them. Owen said that there is a grass in the forest that gives off a white color when you break it, and even causes scabies when you come into contact with it. He suggested telling everyone that he contracted this disease, since he most often comes into contact with frogs. Shunan really liked this idea. He promised that if Owen could convince the lizard tribe to come to them, then his family would forever be freed from the fate of the victims. The lizard began to thank the frog for this. Shunan believed that this time they would need a huge sacrifice and asked the lizard to try to bring the entire tribe. Owen asked to give Rak a pair of bows for negotiations. This time, the lizards brought with them a large number of some skeins to the negotiations. Rakraku said that they contain herbs that can be used to treat scabies. He didn't understand if even this was not enough to exchange for onions. Looking at the number of herbs collected, Owen realized that they had collected all the herbs in the area. Shunan refused, saying that it was not their number that mattered. It was just that the exchange of weapons required a certain amount of trust between the tribes. The leader is already tired of this constant talk about trust, and he asked Shunan to fulfill one of his requests in order to strengthen trust between their tribes. This request involved a one-on-one conversation with Owen. The frog unconditionally agreed to such a request because he was sure that the lizard was on his side. Both lizards moved away from the eyes and ears of everyone present. Owen said that before becoming part of the tribe, his gray-brown brothers went through a brotherhood ceremony, and before that they got to know frogs better. He asked the leader to talk about himself and his tribe and promised to try to be as open as possible in response. The lizard asked Rak if he agreed that they needed to cast aside distrust and take a step towards meeting each other. At that moment, the leader again noticed the same butterfly that God usually sent to him. He thought that the god of beetles was trying to warn him about something. She sat right on Owen's head. He was surprised by this. Having asked what kind of butterfly this was, he brushed it off his head. Rakrak agreed that there was some mistrust between their tribes and suggested putting an end to it. The leader decided to tell the lizard everything about his tribe. Upon returning from the negotiations, the frogs praised Owen. They said that they had finally managed to achieve excellent results. Shunan was amazed that Rakrak and his tribe agreed to come to their camp on their own and called them idiots. Shunan's henchmen said that when the lizards invited them to their village, he assumed that they had set a trap for them. However, as it turned out, they were too stupid for that. The frogs now knew the location and size of the village, as well as their knowledge of healing. Scouts reported that there were about 600 individuals in their settlement, but in fact there were only 300 individuals and no more than 30 warriors. Shunan did not expect that the lizard tribe would trust them so much, and praised Owen for playing a significant role in this. He asked the lizard what he would like to receive as a reward, and he replied that what Shunan promised him was enough for him. However, the frog asked in surprise what he had promised him, and the lizard reminded him that he had promised that his children would never be sacrificed, and he would be allowed to live with them. The henchman was surprised that Shunan could promise such a thing, and he asked him not to be angry, saying that his father would understand him. He was sure that one should not always be strict with lizards. Sometimes it is necessary to show them that they can live well led by frogs. The frog promised Owen that he would remember his promise, and the lizard thanked him in return. After this conversation, he again sat on the shore, watching the island where his children were. He thought that now, finally, as he wanted, he could live with his family. The lizard believed that after this he simply could not have any problems left. He thought that now all the rest of the problems of the stupid leader Rakrak. This lizard should have been more careful. He remembered how Rakrak drew some signs on the ground and said that they called them letters, and it was his tribe that invented them. The leader showed different letters and explained their meaning. He also said that you can write several letters side by side. If you write letters side by side, they have their own meaning. For example, not a lie means the truth. Owen didn't understand why Rakrak told him about the letters and not the frogs. It was all about trust, the trust that was formed between the tribes of lizards and frogs. It worried the leader much less than the trust that had formed between him and Owen. The leader did not believe at all in the words that the lizard spoke about frogs. He believed that they all had some kind of secret meaning. His tribe was familiar with pain and knew what it was like to be confused and afraid. He said that they are the same as Owen and know suffering in person. A tear rolled down the lizard's cheek, and he asked if Rakrak wanted to tell him something else. But he said no, because he had already seen glimmers of faith in them. Owen thought that the leader was very self-confident, but he could not cope with the frogs and their faith. You shouldn't talk about defeating a monster to someone who hasn't even seen a real monster. They didn't even know how to use a bow, let alone the secret frog weapon. He believed that it was Rakrak's stupid decision to tell him about the letters out of the blue. He couldn't trust Owen. The lizard did not understand why the leader believed him. After all, he is a simple deceiver and cunning. Shunan told everyone to hurry up as the Black-Scale tribe had already arrived. Rakrak entered the frog village along with his people. Shunan ran out to meet them along with his retinue. The leader thanked them for their hospitality. They both said they hoped the meeting would deepen their tribe's relationship. Rakrak asked the owners not to worry about their weapons. They were just afraid that they would suddenly meet a cockatrice along the way. Shunan thought that they still wouldn't believe it if he told them that they wouldn't be able to defeat the cockatrice with the help of these sticks. But when the feast began, the frogs planned to make their guests drunk and shoot them with poisoned arrows. The leader looked around and, not noticing Owen, asked where he was, and Shunan said that he was preparing for a banquet, after which he loudly called him, saying that the warriors of Black Scales had come to them. The frog noticed him drawing something on the ground and assumed that he was deciding where to seat the guests. He asked the guests to come and say hello to Owen, and he went to check the readiness of the food. The lizards approached Owen, and he said that he had marked their places at the table with letters. After all the lizards have taken their places, the feast will begin. This feast was supposed to mark the beginning of peace and friendship between the two tribes. The leader gave the command to Yuri to start. The lizard was ready to obey the orders of the leader. He threw his spear at one of the frog tribe warriors. With one throw, the lizard pierced the frog's head right through. Rakrak ordered to destroy all the frogs, and the lizards began to kill the frogs one by one. Some of them suggested that Owen might have known about the upcoming attack. Rakrak assumed that they had killed everyone. Ur reported that while they were attacking the warriors, many frogs managed to escape, and among them was Shunan, so most likely they would have to face the shooters in the near future. Although everything went according to plan and the arrows could not stop them. Rakrak had a request for Owen. Shunan did not understand why everything turned out this way, and blamed Owen for everything. He turned to one of his tribe members, asking if he had conveyed his orders to everyone. All the village warriors had to attack the lizards, and their lizards must remain in the village until the warriors arrived there. It was necessary to attack the enemy before help arrived. Shunan ordered everyone to attack when ready. The tips of their arrows were soaked in the poison of poisonous frogs. All the lizards have to do is touch it, and they will immediately experience terrible torment. The leader ordered the soldiers to hide behind the metal layers. All the arrows flew off the shields. Not a single one managed to penetrate him. The frogs did not expect such ingenuity from the lizards. Shunan couldn't believe that they had knocked back all the arrows. Rak said that these plates could even withstand spears, that there were some kind of arrows for them, and Yor said that these were very good things. The frog ordered his warriors to continue shooting and not let the enemy get closer to them. Everything around was covered in smoke and confused Shunan. Because of this smoke, the enemy was not visible at all, and the accuracy of their shots became much lower. He was interested in where this smoke could have come from. The lizards of the frog tribe did not understand why Owen began to set fire to the tree, and he asked them a counter question, asking what else they were going to do with these sticks instead of weapons. They assumed that Mr. Shunan ordered the village to be burned. But Owen said that it was a warrior from the Black Scale tribe who asked him for a favor. The lizards were indignant that one of them decided to go against the frogs, but he asked to trust him. Owen was confident that the lizards would be able to defeat the frogs. His fellow tribesmen were interested in how they were going to do this, and how the lizards could trust him after he did this to them. Owen asked them to just trust him. After all, he is a cunning Owen, and even he decided to risk everything he had. Seeing how confident he was, the lizards decided to trust him. They also took sticks and set them on fire, deciding to help their fellow tribesmen. It dawned on Shunan that this was Owen's doing, and he ordered to retreat, saying that the lizards from the village had also betrayed them. Now the advantage was on their side, and it was necessary to urgently retreat. But his assistant was worried that in this case, they would finish off the warriors. Shunan thought that he was surrounded by idiots, because if he fell into danger, then the whole tribe would end. Realizing that they had no other choice, the frogs asked if they would go to the warrior Shunan Oboy. Shunan had no doubt about this warrior's fighting skills. However, there was a more reliable and effective way to get rid of these lizards. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, one of Shunan's henchmen reasoned that Shunan and his warriors were fighting on the southern side of the village. There was a detachment of warriors near the welcome feast, and they sent 5 more to reconnaissance. He assumed they were all already dead. Now there were 15 warriors left with Shunan and 4 or 5 on the island. Another 10 were with him, and together with the warriors of the upper part of the village, there were only 45 of them. The numerical advantage was still on their side. He ordered the soldiers to coat their arrows with poison. The frogs were going to go into battle after Mr. Shunan arrived. The trees shook, and they realized that someone was approaching them. Oba ordered to prepare to shoot. He felt very strong excitement and did not understand why it was. He had exactly the same feeling as when meeting a cockatrice. His instincts told him that danger lay ahead. He ordered everyone to shoot. Oba was very surprised to see Jael riding Manan. In these lands, the Manan grew even stronger. The second rider was interested in the question of whether arrows would hit their beast. But Jael said that he simply ate them, because he eats everything that flies near him. Manan got angry. He has been violent lately. Jael pointed out to the Manunu, the frog tribe warriors, and said that there was a whole feast for him there. One of the warriors shouted to Oboy that the arrows were of no help against this hulk, and he replied that he could see it himself. He thought maybe they should shoot in the eyes, but if they wanted the poison to work, they needed to come up with something else. His thoughts were interrupted by Manan, who rushed as if spellbound at the warriors of the frog tribe. Oba barely managed to dodge, but his partner was much less lucky. He realized that this monster could not be compared with the cockatrice. It was much faster and could not be aimed at the eyes at all, which means that in order for the poison to have an effect on it, you need to get the poison straight into its mouth. After this idea came to his mind, he threw the poisonous frog towards the Manun. As expected, he caught it with his mouth. Oba ordered all the warriors to throw their frogs into his mouth. He believed that the monster could not have protection from poison. Manan caught every single frog. Jael didn't understand what they were doing, but the second rider explained to her that they were throwing frogs from their bags at him. The girl did not understand why they were giving away their weapons. If they wanted to poison the Manun, then they should have known that this idea was initially a failure, because the third blessing of the black scale lizards is resistance to poisoning. Oba, standing right in front of the monster, realized that his plan was not working. Manan pounced on him and bit off his head, after which he ate the rest of his body. A lot of blood was shed that day, and the whole village of the frog tribe was burned. However, some frogs were still alive and ready to attack. One of their warriors fired his poisoned arrow. She flew from behind straight into Rakrak's head. But sensing something was wrong, he broke the arrow with one deft swing of his tail. Ur, who had struck the attacking warrior, screamed and called for the next one. Apparently, this was the last warrior, and Shunan, abandoning his tribe, simply ran away. But thanks to this, the gray-brown lizards began to attack the frogs, and everything turned out quite well. It was strange that despite all the problems of the tribe, their great leader Alroy never appeared. Alexander, watching this battle, thought that this was his merit. He found a deadly disease that infects the mucous membrane of amphibians. Despite the fact that it was quite difficult to do, he was still able to find it. Around the time Rakrak decided to leave the Holy Land, hundreds of kilometers away, God found this disease, and then he was able to transport her to such a distant lake. This was done thanks to countless wasps and other insects, and after that, the strong leader of the humanoid frogs suddenly disappeared. Even an attempt at sacrifice for healing did not help anyone. After the battle on the island, the frogs asked the two-headed god to accept their offerings and show these lizards all the power of God. They asked to destroy all lizards. Shunan arrived and was surprised that his father had already begun the ritual. They believed that victory would definitely be theirs. Covered in soot, Owen ran to Rakrak. The leader praised him for having done the task well, but he did not understand why there was such a rush. Owen tearfully begged them to go to the island in the lake. After all, on that island there were children of lizards, whom the frogs were going to sacrifice to their god. This god could not heal them, but he may begin to attack the lizard tribe, and the black-scale warriors may not have enough strength to defeat him. The leader said that Owen should have told him about this earlier, because the frogs had already sailed there on boats, and the lizards would now not be able to reach this island. Swimming was dangerous, because having reached the shore, the lizards would be defenseless against their bows, and they could start shelling even when the warriors were in the water. Owen began to cry, saying that his son was there and that he should be sacrificed. Rakrak got angry, saying that Owen should have told him about this a long time ago, and then asked why he didn't trust him sooner. He did not believe in the god of these frogs, and was sure that the lizards would be able to defeat him on their own. Even if this god appeared in front of Rakrak at the moment, he would show him the power that could defeat even a god. The leader asked why the lizard didn't tell him about this earlier, for the sake of his own child. This could change absolutely everything. If only Rakrak had known about Shunan's intentions a little earlier. The god of frogs appeared, and they began to praise this two-headed creature. They pointed to the lizard children and asked to accept their offering. Alroy asked to punish these black lizards for daring to disturb their sacred lake. He asked God to punish them all with his power. Owen, who was watching the island, saw the two-headed creature and realized that it was too late, and he was too late. Rakrak's Jowl also watched the island with him. They thought that perhaps they should try after all, but this time they had no advantage and absolutely no tricks could help them. There could have been losses in their ranks. Thinking about this, Rakrak again noticed that same butterfly. He showed it to Owen and asked if he believed in miracles. Instead of a butterfly, a huge insect appeared in front of them. The two-headed god of frogs was in no hurry to accept their offering. The leader of the frogs did not understand what was happening, because usually he received them with delight. However, when he turned around, he saw a huge insect heading towards them. These huge creatures were ready to fight. The frogs mistook this insect for the god whom the lizards worshipped. This creature that God created looked like a praying mantis. God used the fourth-level minor race and the minimum level of divinity and faith, as well as the essence of abomination. When all these conditions were met, Alexander managed to create the creature. Most likely, at this stage, very few players have managed to achieve the same level of progress. The two-headed god, opening his mouth, rushed at the mantis. However, he was easily able to close his mouth with his paw. The frogs scattered in different directions and begged for help. The children of the lizards called their parents, because they were also very scared. Shunan, along with his father, hoped that their god could soon win. The praying mantis addressed the god of frogs, calling him a water serpent donning the guise of a deity. He said that he should have realized long ago how insignificant he was. The praying mantis promised to present it to his creator. Having pierced the neck of the frog god with his paw, he promised to help him atone for his sinful stupidity, after which he tore off his head and said that he would atone for his sins with flesh and blood. The two-headed monster was destroyed. Thanks to this, the mantis acquired the skill of enormous strength. The lizards rejoiced. They were glad of the victory. The bug god thought that this monster looked incredibly strong, but it was still too far from the creature created by the god. He was confident that the weak enemy had failed to unleash his full potential. Thanks to the destruction of the two-headed monster, Alexander managed to obtain the essence of the golden spirit. Alexander thought that he was very lucky and decided to open a new unknown habitat. God understood the reason why the monster did not use all its strength. It was an inhabitant of seawater, and this lake contains fresh water. A habitat in the river would be useful, but right now they don't really need it. He decided to put this ability aside, since he might need it someday. The frogs that swam away from the island could not understand how this could happen to them and their god. Shunin realized that his father was not weak because of scabies. He believed that this happened because of the power of the two-headed monster, because he was so bewitched by it. From the moment the god appeared, he began to rely on him for everything. All the warriors were hiding behind God, and Shunin himself has become a coward who cannot come forward. The entity appeared before its creator and announced that his will had been fulfilled. God thanked the mantis for his good work and released him to rest until next time. When leaving, the mantis said that when the time comes, he will again submit to his creator. God thought that everything was finally calm. He was interested in whether Rakrak would stop there. The leader watched as the frogs headed on boats to the upper village. He decided since the island was empty, they could simply swim across the lake. He said that on this day, they should win an unconditional victory, and asked if there was at least one lizard who could lead his warriors to the upper part of the frog village. Owen said that he could go, because he still needed to go to the island to see his son. He said that he was not tired yet and would cope with this task. The rest of the lizards of Owen's tribe asked the leader to allow them to help his warriors in the battle with the frogs. But he was against it and said that they were not warriors and would not be able to fight with such wounds. But the lizards insisted on their own. One of them said that he had previously been a warrior, and he was sure that not only warriors were capable of killing frogs. They said that after the Rakraka tribe was able to repel their oppressors, everyone was inspired and came to take part in the battle. This fire grew in their hearts from the time they became slaves. The leader said that they were just upset. They confirmed this and said that they were in despair because of all the friends, children, and grandchildren they had lost, and they really wanted revenge for all this. The leader agreed with them and said that they had every right to be angry. He ordered everyone who seeks revenge to follow him. Rakrak remembered how Shunin taught him archery. He talked about how Rakrak needed a little more practice to be at the level of the warriors of the frog tribe. But the leader was indignant. He did not understand why he was not yet at the level of the warriors, because he hit right in the center of the target. And he explained that this is not the most important thing in shooting skill. Rakrak had strength and accuracy, but he spent too much time aiming. The frog said that it is first necessary to slow down or completely immobilize the victim, and only then finish it off. Rakrak decided to remember these words from Shunin. Then he promised to teach the leader how to make bows if they improved relations between their tribes. He said that the materials are very simple and any lizard will be able to get them. Rakrak did not understand what kind of unpleasant feeling he experienced that time. Now sailing to the island, he thought that he could only find out about this personally from Shunin. Owen was the first to run out of the water. He was in a hurry. The lizard wanted to finally hug his child. The black-scale lizards watched the families reunite. Rakrak ordered Yuri to send the wounded along with the children on a boat and to go with them himself. Then he needed to move the gray lizards to the lower part of the village in order to cause confusion among the enemies. Yuri suggested that they would attack from two sides, but the leader said that only after he had distracted the enemy's attention should he and his warriors swim across the lake and begin to attack. The lizards were confident that everything would go fine because there were now fewer frogs and they had a new divine blessing. Their black scales were difficult to see in the water under the moonlight. The enemy will end. Seeing the lizards appearing out of nowhere, the frogs began to run scattered. They did not understand where the enemy came from and why he was not noticed. While they were thinking, Rakrak and his warriors began to attack. They began to kill the enemy. The frogs begged for help, but they had no chance. The enemy beat everyone without mercy. The leader of the frog tribe was frightened when he saw Rakrak in front of him and asked the two-headed god to repay all the sacrifices he made to him and save him. However, the chief was not interested in these pleas, and he stabbed his spear straight into the chest of the frog chief. Having killed him, Rakrak said that their god no longer exists. The leader was interested in where Shunin had gone and he ordered to find him. Frightened, Shunin sat in cover and thought that there were much more of their warriors. They had poisoned weapons. All the advantages were on their side. Now his father could no longer command the warriors, and the lizards were resistant to poison, which meant that arrows were no problem for them. He didn't understand how they should proceed. Lost in his thoughts, he lost sight of the enemy leader, who crept up behind him and thereby frightened him. He hoped that in this hiding place he would be able to remain unnoticed. Rakrak asked him if he was a warrior. He said that he would be merciful and allow the enemy to die the death of a warrior and ordered them to raise their weapons. But Shunin begged for mercy and asked how their friendship was. He said that he did not hold any grudge against the lizard tribe at all. Rarik thought about his words, and Shunin said that they were also threatened by this two-headed monster. He offered to reveal one secret to the leader. The frog promised to tell him how to make a bow, because the leader was interested in these materials. and Rakrak asked to tell what they made it from, and he replied that it was made from tendons. They take tendons from the back, but this was not enough for the leader. He was also interested in whose tendons they used. In a shaking voice, Shunan said that these were the tendons of lizards. After these words, he realized that the end had come for him. It seemed to him that he had dug his own grave. Rakrak only said in response that he understood him. He said that they did not hold a grudge against each other and decided to accept the frog's deal. The leader told Shunan to run as far as possible, and he ran as fast as he could and never looked back. Owen asked if the chief would allow him to escape, and he replied that everything was fine and pulled the bowstring. He aimed at the back of the fleeing Shunan. The leader thought that he simply needed a moving target. Taking aim, he fired an arrow that immobilized the enemy. They subsequently used his body as a target, shooting and pulling arrows out of him again and again. The leader trained very hard in archery. Owen approached him and said that now he could control the bow much better, and the arrows were flying in the right direction. Rakrak noted that they needed to make the bowstring stronger, since they would break if they pulled it even a little tighter. However, in the current conditions, they could not find better material, and besides, the time had come to leave this forest. Winter was approaching, and this place was the habitat of buffaloes. In search of food, water buffaloes usually move to warmer places. Rakrak asked Owen if he went hunting again today and received a positive answer. He said that they had taken care of the frogs that were roaming the area, and now there should be no problem supplying bow material for a while. The leader liked this news. The chief asked if Alroy was Owen's target, but he replied that of course not, because he was wounded just as seriously as his son, and he would become someone's headdress, just like his son's bones on the leader's body. Owen's son made a small figurine out of wood. Seeing her, Rakrak said that this was their guardian. He really liked this thing. He said the figurine was beautiful and really well made. Owen's son said that he wanted to give it to the great leader, but he asked if the boy was sure that he wanted to say goodbye to this little thing. But Owen said that it was all right, because these days making and exchanging objects is quite a popular practice among the village children. Jiaolu was interested in how many more such children there were in the villages, to which the boy joyfully reported that there were many of them. The boy said that the keeper is the one who saved them, because this is a great and kind creature. Rakrak said that he was sorry that he only had one of them, and Owen suggested that they look for them in the village. The leader was ready to pay any price for them or exchange them for something, but he decided to return to their conversation and asked Owen what he was talking about earlier. The lizard said that in the cave where the frogs were hiding, he discovered something strange. He invited the leader to look at it himself. Owen led Rakrak to the cave and showed him the entrance, saying that the frogs used it as a hiding place. Then he suggested we go inside. The lizard said that everyone who was inside was killed, and Rakrak noticed there the same butterfly that God usually sent him with some signs. Owen found this too suspicious, but the leader didn't seem to hear him. He watched like a butterfly. He didn't understand how they could carve something so detailed into such hard stone. Jael noticed that this stone is similar to the one that was on the back of the beetle. God suggested that these might be ancient ruins. There are many types of ancient ruins that can be used to discover wonders or gain knowledge. Among them are items with specific functions, or ruins where you can get demonic items. However, with such a low level of development of civilization, even if the tribe masters ancient knowledge, it will not matter much. Miraculous ruins can create or change special resources and great mysterious blessings, and they are fixed in a specific location. They are of great value to Rakrak as he is a nomad. The likelihood of a unique relic appearing is very low. God hoped that these were not the ruins of an ancient castle. The entrance above the stairs in this cave lit up. The lizards decided to follow these stairs and see where they would lead them. When they entered, they saw a huge slope down and many stairs, and thought that they had to go through all of them. Jael asked the leader if he was going to pray to God, and he said that he did not want to bother him over any trifles. They saw many glowing eyes in front of them, and did not understand what it all meant. They assumed that it was all rats. There were a huge number of them. Rakrak asked why these rats hissed so loudly, and Jael said that these were not rats, but nutria. She was sure that he had heard about them before. But he was embarrassed that they were so big, and he didn't think they moved in such groups, and they also seemed furious to him. Owen said that this was the first time he had seen such a thing, and then Rakrak suggested that they were just some kind of monster rats. He assumed that they were the ones guarding this place and ordered everyone to be on alert. These rats began to attack, and the lizards were forced to defend themselves. The leader ordered to kill them all because they were strangely aggressive. One of the lizards suggested that they could eat them and offered to gut these rats and take them with them. Joel suggested that perhaps such animals could be raised on their farm in the same way as water buffaloes. Owen grinned and said that if she wanted to do something new on the farm, then maybe she should pay attention to the fish. And the girl asked in surprise if the fish didn't appear and disappear on their own when it wanted. The lizard told her that they also reproduce by laying eggs. Even the frogs knew this, so they forbade fishing during the breeding season. He said that to breed fish, they would only need to build a platinum and keep the fish locked up while they are young. The lizard promised to think carefully about this upon returning to the village. One of the rats was alive, and when Yuri was about to take it to remove the skin, but as soon as he touched it, he felt a sharp and burning pain in his hand. Rakrak did not understand how this was possible and decided to check it himself. The demon-possessed Nutria could attack the enemy with electricity using a simple touch. God thought that these were the ruins of a demonic castle. And if Rakrak manages to break through these demonic ruins, then there is a high probability that he will gain demonic power. Mastering magical abilities will not immediately make him a magician, but with each generation the forces will become more powerful and they will be able to create descendants of sorcerers. But there is one problem. In the Lost World, divinity and magic are in conflict. According to the setup, magic comes from ancient evil, not from God. Great magicians develop their own powers without relying on the gods. If the number of such people increases, punishment will follow. The point is not that there is no way to prevent this, but that there are many options for the development of events. Gradually, the demonic ruins will reveal their true face and will tempt the lizards located there. Rakrak noticed something in front of them that called him a wanderer and asked if he wanted to have such power. It said that if the leader wanted it, it could give it to him. At that moment, Jowla approached Rakrak and said that if he was not feeling well, then they could leave and return to this place later. He ordered to make sure that all the rats were dead and to check their bows and spears and all other equipment. Looking again at the something that appeared in front of him, he assumed that only he could see it. He was interested in what it was. It was as if it read his thoughts and said that it was a spirit protecting this place, and it was visible only to those who had great power. The leader did not understand what kind of power this spirit was talking about. Then he thought that he could communicate with thoughts, but his deepest feelings were not transmitted. God knew that there was a demonic spirit in front of Rakrak, but he did not understand whether he should warn the leader about this. Having decided to look at the list of the lizard's abilities, the god was surprised to see cunning among them. He did not know when he managed to acquire it. He theorized that Rakrak managed to develop this ability while fighting Shunin. Alexander found this really interesting, and he continued observing the cave in which the lizards were located. The spirit continued his story. He said that the force he was talking about is called electricity. With its help, it is possible to burn living beings with a burning flame, and the ability to emit light similar to the sun appears. The spirit could give such power to Rakrak. Rakrak thought that if the spirit gave him such power, then he would be very grateful to him. However, the spirit said that everything was not so simple, and there were certain conditions for receiving this power. The leader did not understand anything, because it seemed to him that the spirit had just offered to give the power of electricity to him, and he did not say anything at all about the conditions. But the spirit assured that these conditions were a mere trifle, and the strength of Rakrak would be enough to overcome them. The leader was disappointed by this conversation. He believed that if the spirit wanted to make a deal, he should have communicated this from the very beginning. Rakrak said that if this spirit wanted something from him, he should show the appropriate attitude and be more careful from now on. He asked the spirit to name the conditions that he must fulfill to receive such power. He was interested in what exactly this spirit wanted from him, but if the spirit tried to hide something, then there would be no further conversation between them. Their conversation was interrupted by Jael, who said that all the lizards were ready to move into the village, but he told them to go, saying that he would catch up with them later. After which the leader returned to the conversation. The spirit told him that he was locked in these ruins and could not get out. He wanted Rakrak to go down and defeat the guard who protected the seal, after which this spirit would gain freedom and bestow its ability on the leader. Rakrak was interested in whether the spirit was talking about the sparkling power of the monstrous rats lying around everywhere. The spirit said so. That this is not the most correct description, but this is that very force. He repeated that this ability is called electricity. At the moment, it can only create sparks, however. The more it is used, the more powerful it will become. It will even be possible to create a thunderstorm with its help. This ability can improve and develop, and someday in the future, it can even become comparable to divine power. The spirit's ability was so extensive, and Rakrak could master it. And according to the spirit, not only Rakrak could do this, but another representative of his tribe could use this power. And if he wants to monopolize it, then it will be necessary to perform a ritual. It seemed incredible to the leader, but he did not understand why a creature with such power was locked in this place. But the spirit explained, saying that this was due to the fact that his ability was too powerful. Since he cannot be defeated, he was locked in this trap. Rakrak was interested in what would happen next, since the spirit had just demonstrated how dangerous it was. The leader was sure that his interlocutor was hiding something from him, and suggested that after using this force, there might be many more side effects than the benefit from it. He told this spirit not to lie anymore, because he could go and simply destroy the entrance to this cave, and then no one would ever be able to enter these ruins. The spirit agreed to tell the interlocutor everything and asked the lizard to listen to him. It turns out that he was one of the creatures that once ruled this world. This spirit came from a long-forgotten ancient demon. Neither the gods nor he remembered their origin. He was locked here for an unknown amount of time, because abilities with unknown origins intoxicate people. Since people do not know the origin of powers, they mistakenly believe that they belong to them. Rakrak thought that he saw those whose minds were besotted with power. He suggested that this demonic force affects people this way. The spirit confirmed his assumptions and said that besides all this, his abilities were disordered. Winners are selected randomly. God's power is given to those who are chosen by his court. But on the other hand, even those who do not know how to handle power could master it. Rakrak thought that over time the ability develops, and there will definitely be people who will desecrate God and rebel against him. But this ability was definitely powerful and desirable, and would definitely be useful in battle. The leader agreed to the spirit's conditions, but he also had his own. The spirit was surprised that the lizard wanted to put forward some of his own conditions to him, but he asked what exactly. Firstly, the lizard was interested in the possibility of transferring it to only a few selected people in connection with the random transfer of ability. The spirit suggested that this could be done, but he did not understand why the leader needed this. He explained that if this gift is given only to a select few, then it will be perceived as God's choice. And then the creatures will stop contradicting God. The second condition was that the spirit also had to begin to believe in their bug god. But the spirit was indignant, because he was a demonic spirit that is older than all modern gods. Rakrak believed that this was not important, because what mattered was how he would behave in the future. But the spirit considered this absurd, because the gods do not like demonic spirits. But the leader asked not to judge their god with his prejudices. Rakrak considered the nameless bug god to be generous, and this spirit seemed useful to him. The spirit asked if the god of these lizards could accept him. The leader was sure that if the spirit agreed to the conditions, then everything would be exactly like that. The spirit confessed that he is not actually trapped in these ruins, but simply rules over them. And these nutria were simply an attempt to break the leader in order to understand whether he was suitable or not. But he still deceived the lizard, and he wondered if he was angry for this. Rakrak said that he understood everything and therefore the spirit was forgiven. The leader believed that since the spirit lived with these monstrous rats in such a damp and dark place, then the lizard should have been more patient. He said that the interlocutor should go outside and see many beautiful places. The spirit asked what the lizard's name was, and he introduced himself. After this, the demonic spirit reported that the test had been passed, and if the nameless bug god accepted it, then this ability would belong to Rakrak. Alexander had the opportunity to possess this spirit and associate it with the saint, and he decided to accept this chance. Thus, he managed to overcome the punishment and gain demonic ability. He mentally praised Rakrak, considering their meeting to be a stroke of luck for both of them. So the nameless god of beetles gave Rakrak the ability, and he mastered the power of thunder and lightning. This was the story of the chosen black lizard. 9 whole years have passed since then. But despite the whole story told, the person talking with the black lizard did not understand what the nameless god of beetles had to do with thunderstorms. The lizard asked what color the lightning was, but without waiting for an answer, he said that it was blue. Then he asked what the name of their god was. The man grinned and replied that everyone called him the blue god of beetles, but he still did not understand why this was so. But the lizard explained to him, saying that he always sent blue butterflies as clues. The man realized that in this whole long story, they had never introduced themselves to each other and said that his name was Hui. He was wondering what the name of his interlocutor was. But the lizard said that they would have to end their conversation there. It seemed to the black lizard that uninvited guests had come to them. Hui said that the gnolls came. These are the so-called hyena people. This is a warlike savage race with a tribal way of life. The lizard told the man that he had one question for him. He wondered if they were like the people from Salkate. Thoughtful, the man said that they were defenseless and poorly armed, and they also lacked vigilance. To him, they were just wandering gnolls. The lizard liked his reasoning. Removing his hood, he prepared to shoot. He was interested in another question, whether in this case they should defeat these hyenas. The hyenas seemed to sense that someone was aiming at them. The arrow hit right near the leg of one of their tribe. The hyena screamed that it was an enemy attack. The lightning that appeared initially confused them, and then she hit all the gnolls in that place with a good discharge of electricity. Having recovered from a good shake, one of them shouted that the lizard had done it. He cursed this lizard, but was forced to give the order to retreat. The lizard finally remembered that he did not have time to introduce himself to this man and said that his name was Owen. Hui couldn't believe he was talking to someone so great. Owen said that he had not used his power for a long time and suggested taking a break to talk for a while. He lit his smoking pipe, and the man thought that these smoking pipes and tobacco were ritual attributes used by selected black lizards to replenish their strength. Owen said that everything was in order, and if the person had any questions for him, he could ask them. Hui did not understand why a lizard with such power would follow someone. He was not talking about betrayal. He was only interested in why the lizard lived such a hard life, wandering alone in this wilderness. Owen said he had a good reason for this. He was full of sins. The lizard talked about how he once betrayed many of his people. However, he was shown the path to redemption. His goal was to spread the names of the blue god of insects and the leader of the Rakraka tribe through stories and writings. This is the path of redemption that he chose. Hui thought that even without his stories and writings in Vriatli, there would be at least someone in this area who had not heard of a tribe of lizards with black scales, and there was no need to mention Rakrak's reputation as a great priest and leader. Owen interrupted his thoughts, saying that if someone suddenly attacked him, he could easily scare them away, after which he asked the man if he was also a wanderer. Hui replied that he too was a wanderer and had come from Automaton. Owen had never heard of this place, so he asked again. The man said that he was heading to the Black Scale tribe in order to convey the words of the Lord Automaton. The lizard said that he did not know that he was a guest, but he was glad about it. Without saying anything, Owen whistled, and a huge bird ran in their direction, its steps shaking everything in the area. Hui was scared and assumed that a basilisk was approaching them. Owen calmly took this bird by the leash and said that the man is only half right. It was a quorka, or to be more precise, a cross between a basilisk and a chicken. He ordered the guest to climb onto this miracle bird. The lizard said that he had not been in the village for a long time and just wanted to visit his comrades. He promised to take this man away, but in exchange he would have to listen to his story to the end. Already during the movement, Hui asked whether Owen would tell about the blue god of insects or the saga of Rakrak, and he grinned and replied that he would tell a little of everything. Meanwhile, in the tribe of the famous leader and priest Rakrak, they moved in their entirety, driving a herd of buffaloes. The warriors rode on horseback, and ordinary residents moved on their own 2 feet. The leader sat gracefully astride his pet. Over the years, they invented fabric and learned how to sew clothes. Jael approached Rakrak, saying that the elderly stargazer believed that his life was on the brink. He thinks that if not now, he will never be able to talk to the leader of the tribe. The leader ordered the tribe to stop the processions and prepare to spend the night at this place. He asked the worried girl to tell the astrologer that the leader would soon arrive to him and told him to ask her to let the lizard live until that moment. This lizard has always been good at predicting the future, so you need to take care of his funeral. They assumed that this would be a sad night. The lizards were sitting around the tent praying, and inside was a dying elderly astrologer. Upon entering, the leader asked how he was feeling. The doctor who was with him said that he had done everything in his power, but the old man did not have much time left. The astrologer whispered that he was very tired. He said that a lot had happened, and he had the opportunity to visit different places and lands and learn a lot. The lizard lost his arm and was driven out, but he was lucky and met the leader of the tribe. He taught many people to contemplate the sky. However, every lizard one day experiences irresistible fatigue and exhaustion, and there is only one way to cure this disease. This method is to fall asleep forever. The astrologer smiled and said that he had decided to be a little extravagant before his last journey and steal time from the busiest person in the tribe. He asked if time was not the most valuable thing, and the leader laughed. He was glad that even in such a situation, this lizard was joking. The stargazer had one question that no one except Rakrak could answer. The leader was completely attentive and awaiting the question. The lizard was interested in what would happen to them after they died. This question was asked to the first chosen one, the priest closest to the god. What awaited the lizards after death? They say that when everyone dies, they fall asleep. The astrologer wondered if they would always have nightmares. Rakrak replied that unfortunately, he did not know this information. He was interested in why the lizard decided that he could answer this question. But the old man was sure that this was so, because the blue god of insects saved them when they got lost. Therefore, he hoped that he would continue to guide them after they left the world of the living. Such was his faith. He asked the leader if it differed from God's will, but he said that the astrologer was right and everything would be exactly like that. The blue god guided them whenever they were lost, and for sure he would not leave them even after death. The old man smiled and asked if Rakrak really thought so. The astrologer was interested in how all this would happen and whether they would appear face to face before God. The leader thought about it and began to fantasize about how it all could be. He imagined a wonderful place where he could run, enjoy, and relax. He thought about what the weather would be like in that place, and then added that there must be a clean river there. The astrologer said that he would like to have a house in which he could simply relax, not a tent, which gave the impression that he would soon have to move again, but a solid house where he could settle down. He said that he doesn't like tents. Rakrak thought that this old man began to move from place to place, but if he ever found a place where he could calm down while he could breathe, then he would have nothing to complain about. Rakrak sat with the old man and continued their conversation. The same blue butterfly flew to them, and the lizard asked the astrologer if he could see it. But the old man said so, that his vision began to darken. The leader said that he had a gift for the astrologer, but he decided that the lizard was just fooling around. Rakrak indignantly asked if he was going to refuse his gift again. He promised that this time he would find him very quickly. The leader called the astrologer, but it was too late. The butterfly took his soul and carried it to heaven. This beautiful creature brought the old man's soul straight to God. Alexander himself thought about what would happen if he died in the lost world. He made a decision to create an afterlife. The conditions for this peaceful death are not yet clear, but the afterlife is a very important element in the lost world. Even just having a well-thought-out view of the afterlife can increase the chances of victory. The wicked will be doomed to eternal suffering, while the good will go to heaven. This division exists to maintain morality and ethics. Like Valhalla, it can also be used as a training ground for warriors. Subsequently, the souls trained in the afterlife can be sent back to Earth. As a result, all this can be useful later in the game. Now Alexander did not need to rush, because much was just beginning. He could control the afterlife as he wanted. He called this afterlife the Ancient Meadow. The sun was shining brightly and the birds were chirping. After his death, the astrologer found himself in this meadow. He felt as if something was tickling his nose. When he woke up, the lizard did not understand where he was. The thought came to him that this was all a wonderful dream. But after thinking a little, he realized that the leader was right, and this was the very meadow he was talking about. There were no stars there, just like there were no stone houses. The astrologer thought that he probably shouldn't have hoped for that. Maybe he didn't need a house or anything like that. He remembered the last words he heard from Rakrak and thought that this was a really good gift. The lizard sat and enjoyed the moment, humming some melody. Looking around, the astrologer saw that there were other lizards in this place, but none of them have woken up yet. He was glad that there were other lizards in this meadow besides him, but decided that it would be wrong to wake up any of them. The astrologer saw a familiar lizard and thought that this girl learned arithmetic from him and was a warrior during her life. He remembered how she died when their tribe was attacked by a goblin alliance. It was a surprise attack from the United Goblin Tribes. These creatures attacked a place where mainly old people and children lived, who were not sure that they would be able to hold out until help arrived. The astrologer felt helpless. It seemed to him that the end had already come. The goblins mercilessly attacked the defenseless lizards, and at that moment this girl appeared. She stood up to protect the elderly and children. Meeting face to face with the enemy, she thanked the astrologer for learning to count well and said that it was better to sacrifice one life to save two. Some of the warriors of the black-skinned tribe could even disobey the order of the leader if they considered their action necessary. And it was her heroic self-sacrifice that no one expected. The lizard blamed himself for not being able to stop this innocent child. At the funeral of the dead warriors, the leader was furious. He believed that it was all because of the arithmetic that the old man taught them. He said that all the warriors who knew how to count, disobeying the order, rushed to fight the enemy. They all believed that it was better to sacrifice one life in order to save two. The old man then asked him if he really thought that these warriors had acted wrongly. But the leader was furious that they were all right, and all he could do was be angry. After this, many warriors came to learn to count, and she inspired an interest in arithmetic among the warriors. He was glad that they met again, and tears of happiness appeared in his eyes. He wondered if there was someone in this meadow who had already woken up. He saw someone's tail behind a tree and wondered who it could be. The astrologer asked who was there, but did not hear an answer, and the hiding lizard began to run away from him. The old man rushed after him. He asked where that lizard was going. The astrologer ran out to some stone structure and thought that if God was here, then he would really like to learn something from him. He was interested in why the blue god of insects chose them. As he walked up the stairs, he considered all sorts of reasons. This is probably because lizards are superior to other species, or maybe because the god is just good. The astrologer did not have a single answer to all these questions. Rakrak considered it all just a lucky coincidence. His thoughts were interrupted when, having climbed the stairs, he saw in front of him a telescope under a glass dome. He thought again that the leader was right and that there were stone buildings and stars in the afterlife. Approaching the telescope, he began to examine it, not understanding what kind of outlandish thing it was. Still, he decided to look into it. And what a surprise he was when he saw what the stars really looked like. He realized that this was the true shape of the stars, and everything he knew before was just the tip of the iceberg. The lizard thought that it would be very cool if he could pass on all this knowledge to the living. The god watching him was grateful that he still cared about his fellow tribesmen. The afterlife is not only a place where the dead go, the afterlife will affect the idea of life after death and the values of those who believe in God. God thought that if warriors ended up in the afterlife, they would dream of Valhalla. And if immortals endowed with special abilities ended up in the afterlife, then they would dream of a beautiful and calm place. And if a scientist ends up in this afterlife, it will serve as the basis for technological development. The afterlife was also supposed to function properly, but he was interrupted when he realized that the real tribe was under threat. The Broken Ear tribe was already on its way, possessing iron technology superior to that of the lizards. They even tamed the saber-toothed tiger. The technological skills and movements of this tribe are unusual. Alexander understood that there had to be a player behind them. However, he had prepared a lot for the war with the players. Now he even had an afterlife. Now he needed to prepare to meet the enemy. The players gradually expanded their territories, and in order to keep up with them, Alexander invested a lot in small beetles. Under his control are 3 large swarms of beetles, and among them there is a swarm of locusts. It gradually slows down the process for players who are fixated on farming. However, he does this without anyone noticing his interference. Alexander also uses them on other carriers of infection, just as he used them on the frog tribe. And finally, he has a nest where all kinds of beetles are raised, which feast on small farm plots. All the defeated lizard tribes joined the Rakraka tribe. Establishing control over the southern peninsula was now only a matter of time. Now the main question for him was how to deal with players who behaved too provocatively. Meanwhile, Owen arrived at the tribe and brought Hui with him. Immediately upon arrival, Jael told him about the death of the astrologer. He was very sorry that this elderly lizard had left their ranks. Hui said that he had heard the name before and suggested that now was not the right time to meet the leader, but Owen said that everything was fine. He said that in their tribe it is not customary to consider the appearance of a stranger at a funeral as something bad. For them, on the contrary, it is a good sign. The tribe was at a funeral when guests arrived. Hui noticed the tribe leader and was surprised that he was shedding tears, and he asked Owen if it was normal for a leader to shed tears like this. The lizard asked a counter question, asking if people don't cry when they are sad. He said that people also cry, but leaders do not do this in public because each of them has their own reputation. Owen said that he knows the meaning of the word reputation and understands that most likely his interlocutor means that if the warriors notice the weakness of the leader, they will not follow him, thinking that he is weak. However, he asked the guest not to even try to explain this to other lizards because they would not understand him. Because for lizards, there is something much more important than reputation. However, they were unable to complete their conversation as the leader approached them and greeted the lizard. Owen apologized for not being able to say goodbye to the stargazer in time, but Rakrak assured him that everything was fine. He asked who the man was next to Owen, and the lizard said that he had arrived to carry out orders from Lord Automaton. The man introduced himself, saying that he was Hui from Automaton. The lizard looked at him and said only clearly. Hui looked from under his brows at the leader and did not understand what would happen next. The leader invited the new arrivals to go into the tent. Sitting in the tent, he turned to the man, saying that he was probably tired after a long journey, but they would stay awake all that night. He asked Hui to understand their such tradition. The man reached into his pocket and took out a package, saying that he really hoped that the leader would accept this gift from him. He placed a small bag in front of the leader and said that this gift was for him from their Lord Automaton. The lizard dumped the contents into his palm. The gift to the leader was rock salt. Hui said that this is something they are very proud of. This was the first rock salt that the Lord gave to the lizard for nothing. Rakrak suggested that if this is the first, then there will be a second and a third. The man said that after it there would be even more and asked to accept this gift. Saying well, Rakrak clenched his fist and crushed the Lord's gift. Hui didn't understand what all this meant, but the leader ordered that he be handed over to his master. That he accepted this gift with joy, and the man tried to understand what the lizard did with this gift. The leader explained that this is one of their rituals, and the person is not familiar with it because he does not have a god. This ritual is that if you spill a little salt on the floor, God will be happy. He thought that was all the man needed to know, but Hui didn't believe him. He thought it was just a ridiculous lie. The man insisted that it was a gift from the Lord, but the lizard said that it was just a little rock salt, which he used at his own discretion, and therefore did not see any problem at all in it. Hui insisted that the lizard understood that this was not just a gift, because he said that there would be a second and a third time and in large quantities. Rakrak said that he heard that Lord Automaton was rich, and it was a little strange that he would send someone with so much salt. The lizard suggested that next time this man would bring more things to exchange, and the man thought that Rakrak was an experienced lizard. It wasn't that they couldn't communicate because they were different races. He was a little rude, but not entirely, and expressed his refusal diplomatically. Rakrak asked if it was time for the guest to go home and then added, saying that he speaks like a person, but it is difficult for him to add subtext to his speech, and if something like that is required, he is usually used to solving it with the help of a story. Hui said that he did not have such talents, and if the lizard did not like diplomatic conversations, then they should be frank. The lizard should have understood the meaning of this proposal, and therefore the man did not understand the reason for his refusal. First of all, the leader did not like to accept offers, which had already been rejected by someone else. He didn't like to pick up the scraps. If someone rejected this person once, then most likely this proposal is terrible. However, the man did not understand what he was talking about and continued to assure the lizard that this offer came only to him from Lord Automaton. The leader grinned and asked if Hui really believed that he had met Owen completely by accident, and he also accidentally offered to accompany him to the tribe's camp. Owen said that this man came from the north, and not from the west, as he should have. After all, Automaton is located to the west of their location, but to the north lies the tribe of the Broken Ear Salkate. This means that Hui proposed the same thing to Salkate and was refused. Rakrak asked the man to tell him why he was being dishonest with him. Ancient Relic Automaton. Satyron is an ancient relic that cannot be found anywhere else. It is a real fortress with walls 5 meters high. And the dirty warriors restoring Saturn are also a real miracle. In this fortress, which is unknown who built it and when many people from different tribes live. In addition, Automaton had a geographical advantage. The valley in which he was located was the path to the continent. It is in a great location and therefore so protected. It also has a salt mine, which helps the residents in animal husbandry and farming. Rakrak called Hui the lord of this fortress and said that he did not believe in free gifts, especially if this gift is from someone who hides his identity. Hui stood silently, his eyes downcast. Rakrak was amazed that the man did not even deny all this and offered to tell him how he came to this conclusion. The leader said that the man introduced himself and said that his name was Hui. It was important for him to know what the lizards thought about Automaton, and most likely for this reason he revealed his name in order to see the reaction. It is said that even in the Automaton fortress, only a few of the 4 families that are loyal to the Lord know his true name and appearance. Everyone who shares blood with Lord Hui has the Hui part in their names, and the lizard has heard that the Lord has 4 sons and 3 daughters. This man was clearly not a woman, and judging by the wrinkles on his hands, then by human standards he was not at all young. This is how Rakrak managed to determine who this person was. Taking off his hood, the Lord said that the lizard was good at his job. He did not understand how Rakrak managed to find out, because he was not closely acquainted with any lizard. The man admitted that he is the Lord of Automaton, and his name is So Hui. But this didn't change anything at all, and he just wanted to give this salt to the leader of the Black Scales just like that. However, Rakrak was sure that there must be some price for this, since even the greedy Salkoit rejected this offer due to his shrewdness. Rakrak suggested that if he took the salt, his tribe would have to protect the Lord. They will have to worry about protecting the salt mine, even if the conflict occurs through the fault of Automaton, after which he asked if this were not the Lord's intentions. But the man said that this is called diplomacy, and it can also be called a deal. The Lord did not understand why the leader refused, if he knows what benefits this deal can bring him. The lizard was sure that the Lord had already heard this answer from someone else, and he asked why don't they just capture the Automaton? If the lizards throw out the people, then the salt mine and the fortress will belong to his tribe. The Lord asked if Rakrak meant that they intended to attack his people, but he replied that he was simply reasoning about what would be best for his people. This diplomacy brings absolutely nothing useful to his people, so for them to capture the Automaton would be the best solution. If his calculations were correct, even if they had to suffer some losses, they would be able to conquer him. They follow the blue bug god, and if he helps them, the high walls and earthen soldiers will turn to dust. And the leader was also interested in whether this man was afraid of being alone among many lizards. But the man was sure that Rakrak would not kill him. After all, if he dies now, it will be difficult to find a language with the Automaton receiver. The leader was interested in what his successor could do for them. The man asked the lizard if he knew about a game called Go. He talked about how they place white and black stones alternately on intersecting rows, a game where the winner must capture all of the enemy's stones. But now the rules of the game were not the most important thing. What's important on this board is the main stone. The man knew that the game had already begun. This is a game where two gods play with the help of their tribes as stones, and on this board, the lizards and gnolls began their game. And this game is called Aton, because the lizards are also interested in who will become Aton's successor. Recently, the Lord's children began talking about the teeth of wrath, and the rest about the blue butterfly. His children began to believe in gods, but the Rak could not do anything about it, and it was less harmful for them than an attack on automaton. 3 months ago, the gods decided to clash civilization. The opponent was glad to see Nebula, because they had not seen each other for a long time. However, he did not understand when they managed to become friends, and the second god reminded him of their last virtual game. Alexander was interested in, without banal stories, why the opponent then requested a chat. But the opponent did not like the fact that he called that game banal. The opponent was sure that this time he would be able to emerge victorious by simply smearing the nebula. Alexander did not understand why they were having this argument. Alexander clarified that there will be no next time because this is the very last time. But the opponent knew about it and just got a little carried away. In any case, Alexander knew the hegemony style of play. He seems simple, but he has brutal instincts during conflicts. And he's very good at multitasking. There were so many cases where he won because of the wars at the very beginning. The main character thought that he did not need to adapt to something that someone else was good at. Hegemony asked Nebula if he really wanted to determine the winner in different ways, and he said that that's exactly how it is. They both needed the same thing. Automaton and his people were at stake. All that remained was to choose a contradictory prophecy. Prophecy is a skill that can be used if the level of divinity or higher. This is something like a quest that players give to themselves. If the player's prophecy comes true, then he receives additional experience points. However, if it fails, the penalty will also be significant. A decrease in experience points due to the religion points spent on the prophecy, and if the player is lucky, he will receive a penalty or a negative event will occur. Alexander was interested in what would happen if two players use a prophecy. This is called a conflicting prophecy. One side will receive a reward, and the other will receive punishment. Such a turn of events would be ideal. Then they decided to create a prophecy on the topic of who would become the next successor of Automaton. This was the purpose of the contradictory prophecy. Each of them chose one of the Lord's children and placed their bet on him. But before the players made their choice, Hegemony spoke briefly about all the children of the current Lord. They decided to write down their predictions, and then double-check whether they had chosen the same receiver. Hegemony placed its bet on the second child, whose name was Jun Hui. Nebula made a bet on the fourth daughter, whose name was Kyun Hui. The enemy was surprised. He did not expect such a choice from Alexander. Their choice fell on different family members, and therefore they recorded the creation of a contradictory prophecy.